Good evening, Chatham. Welcome to the September 24, 2024 meeting of the Chatham Select Board. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chair. I don't see any such notification. Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31, 2025, this meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 203-386-491 #, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV Xfinity Channel 1072, no longer Channel 8, 1072, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. First order of business is to establish a quorum. Mr. Metters.
Present.
Mr. Dykens.
Present.
Ms. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Shell is present, and Mr. Nicastro.
Present.
We have a somewhat long extended agenda this evening. We have two sets of minutes, August 20 and September 10. We have public announcements and agenda requests. We have public comments on business agenda. There are two items that will be inviting comment alongside of the board when the agenda item comes up, and that would be, I'll mention those when we get to them, but it's the comments on the special town meeting and the presentation of the final draft of the housing production plan. Our business agenda this evening includes, the first item is a recap and discussion, follow-up, et cetera, with respect to our special town meeting of September 16. Second item is a report from Weston and Sampson regarding hydraulic analysis on the town's water supply. Third item is presentation and review of the final draft of the housing production plan, where public comment, as I mentioned, will be accepted alongside of that item when it comes up. Fourth item is considering acceptance of a $10,000 donation to support removal of trees that have fallen into town waterways. The next item is considering, we've deleted item E for those of you who are looking online or otherwise have the packet in front of you. Item F, consider special one-day alcohol permit for Meet the Fleet on September 25, 2024. Item G, consider a special one-day alcohol permit for Mahi Gold Sip and Shop on, I believe that's 3 days, October 19, December 13, and December 14. Next item H, consider a special one-day alcohol permit for the Chatham Boat Company Fall Open House on Saturday, October 5. Next item I, consider a request for sales on town property for the 17th Annual Holiday Shopping Fair on November 23 at the Chatham Community Center. Next item J, consider an update with respect to the Chatham Chamber and Merchants Association Oktoberfest. Next item K, appointments. We have appointments for the Community Housing Partnership. And then finally, we have the town manager's monthly report for August. And then we will go into executive session with no return to open session. So with that, we'll go back to where we started and invite public announcements and agenda items, agenda requests from the board. Oh, sorry? Minutes. Oh, well, we'll do minutes. Thank you. Comments on August 2024.
Move approval of the minutes of August 20th, 2024.
Second.
Mr. Nacastro.
I have one, too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one on page 2, under, in the middle of the page, under the public announcement section. Mr. Nacastro made a request to have, I'd like to insert before the phrase executive session, the words "any outstanding," and then at the end of the sentence, change the period to a comma and add this phrase, "as per regular select board protocol." Do you want me to read that back, Kathy? Thank you.
Mr. Dykens?
Page 3, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 3, third line down with the paragraph, the board expresses thanks for the action and activity of the Traffic Safety Committee. I just don't know where passage is referring to. There was also a request for the committee to discuss the 4-foot passage in townwide sidewalk plan. I just didn't understand what the passage was, that's all.
That was with the bikes and the pedestrian,
Okay.
the 4-foot buffer.
It was, it was only referred to as the passage, so
Oh, yeah,
I was like,
I didn't know.
I believe it was what Ms. Davis just said.
Okay.
So I
Alright,
can
maybe
amend
we
that to clarify
If you
it.
just clean that up, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thanks. That's it.
Okay, with that, oh, I'm sorry, Corey, yeah.
Very minor, more of a nit, Sorry, on page 2, middle of the paragraph, the same item 2 section, under Director of Natural Resources, I believe the dredge is actually it's spelled M-U-R-D-E-N, Murden, I believe is the correct name of the vessel.
That's a worthy catch. Thank you. All right, anything else? All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dyken?
Aye.
And Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Minutes of September 10.
Motion to approve.
Second. Any comments? Mr. Nacastro?
Yeah, I have a handful here. Page 6, it's the 4th paragraph from the bottom, which begins, "The board spoke positively." In the very last sentence, I would strike the initial word "the" and simply say, some board members stated that they did not support speed bumps. I don't think it was the whole board. Page 13, under paragraph F, the second sentence, which says the board expressed their thanks, I think we should probably insert the word anonymous before the word donor. Page 16, third paragraph, which begins, "some members of the board." Second line, I would strike "real" before policy and insert in its place "comprehensive," once the comprehensive policy is adopted. And then on page 17, I just question whether, under the executive session, where we have at the bottom, Mr. Nacastro made a motion to adjourn the executive session. I don't think we include that in the public minutes. I think those go into the executive session minutes. Is that correct, from prior practice?
I think that's my recollection.
Yeah.
But
So we should just delete that.
Mr. Dykens?
I just have 2 nits. In the same paragraph that Dean referred to on page 6, I would just say on the second sentence, the paragraph that starts with the board, the second sentence, "the board inquired about the process to reduce the speed on a road." I just put a period there, and then the process was explained that MassDOT needed to be notified. And then the next page, 1, 2, third paragraph up in the bottom, which starts Frederick Milton Chatham, I would just strike the "he." I would just say Frederick Milton Chatham stated that if the recommendation was done to one person, blah, blah, blah. Nits, but thank you very much. You do a great job.
I have a nit.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Page 16, Eldridge is spelled E-L-D-R-E-D-G-E. It's okay.
Good catch.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all those in favor, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Okay, now we can go to public announcements and agenda requests from the board. Mr. Dykens?
I just have a couple that have aged a bit. Just revisit, please, the signage on Crowell Road for the schools. I have a very diligent constituent who raises the issue with me repeatedly, believes that we need better signage there. So whether we remanded the Traffic Safety Committee or not, or whether the Public Works Director and perhaps the Police Department can take a look, I'd really appreciate it, and so would they. The Cemetery Commission would like to come before the board before October 28th. They have a presentation they'd like to go through, so if we just note that. And then I'm just wondering what happened to the Sears Road, the infringement on the parking area at the end of Sears Road at a public landing there. I just wondered what happened with that. We were going to circle back with the owner, and I just want to hear what happened when we did do that. That's all.
Yeah, I'd like
Thank
to
you very
do
much.
that as well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Metters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that we're kind of back on our weekly schedule, I want to bring a couple things up for discussion for hopefully in the near future. As you know, philosophically, I may differ from other members of the board in certain issues. The first one, no big surprise, I'd request that we have a discussion on our public input process and policy for a couple potential amendments I would like to offer based on the fact that we've had some time for Mike to be chairman for a while, and since we've all now served as chairman for a while, I can kind of push my points a little bit more. So if you would entertain that, I would greatly appreciate that. And the second one, I think the board should have a discussion whether officers of the select board should also serve as officers of other boards and committees at the same time. And we can go into further discussion on that. I don't want to get into debate right now, but I think that is an appropriate discussion to have in a relatively near future. Thank you.
Okay. Any others from the board? From the public, yes, ma'am?
I'm Karen Latin, and I'm here as the chair of the Conservation Commission. And I'm here to make a plea for new members of our commission. Right now, we are full, only because our associate agreed to become a full member 2 weeks ago with you all. He was voted in, otherwise we would not have had a quorum at the meeting the next day. We have 2 associate positions available, which are terrific for learning about the commission. My own personal experiences, you all put me on it. I had no idea really what I was getting onto. I just said I wanted to volunteer in the town, and you all picked that when you interviewed me, and I was on it, and 3.5 years later, I'm now the chair, and it's been a wonderful, invaluable experience. So we have worked hard as commission members trying to find new members, but it's very hard, and we're only 7 people. So I would like to say that if anybody is interested, if they'd contact Kathy Lewis in the town manager's office, and then an interview could be arranged. But anything anybody can do to help us get a couple more members so that we don't run into our issues like we did last 2 weeks ago, and we have people who could potentially step up and become a full member eventually.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
could I just
please.
ask?
Sure.
Thanks for coming forward. It's always been a challenge to fill that commission, and we had it filled.
It is.
We had it filled at one point fully. It might be helpful if you could tell the public what is the commitment in terms of the number of meetings?
We meet 3 Wednesdays a month, the 1st, 2nd, and 4th at 1 p.m. We usually are done by 4 at the latest. Looks like the next couple weeks might be even lighter. And then, of course, there are site visits for whatever's on the agenda for that week. So there is some homework to be done. But it's interesting. You get to go to very interesting places. You learn so much more about our town and all the efforts that are being done to keep it as nice as what it is right now.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks very much.
Yep.
Appreciate your bringing this to our attention. Anything else from, Carolyn?
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol McClellan, South Chatham. I'm also the chair of the Community Housing Partnership. I'm here to make an agenda request for you to engage a consultant to do test fits for 127 Old Harbor. I also have with me a request from our committee, which I'll read you now, and I have submitted to Kathy just a little while ago. At our September 11th, 2024 meeting, the Chatham Community Housing Partnership, the partnership discussed the status of the property at 127 Old Harbor Road. We unanimously voted to recommend that the Select Board move forward by engaging consultant to develop test fits for the property at 127 Old Harbor Road in order to inform future housing development for the RFP for the property. The Community Housing Partnership recommends that this be done now, rather than wait for the Select Board and the Affordable Housing Trust to work out the issue of governance over the property. We recommend that test fits offer a range of possibilities, including at a minimum, a test fit that contemplates the reuse and reconstruction of the existing structures. This would be a 2-dwelling unit. A test fit that continues both the urban rhythm of the existing dwelling on the street and the big house, little house, back house, barn layout of the immediate adjacent dwellings, which would likely include 6 to 8 units depending on their size, and then a higher one that would offer higher density on that lot. We were informed that this could be done for under a $10,000 contract, and we would hope you'd consider moving forward on this while you guys sort out all the other issues with this property, but we don't want a delay, any further delay.
You said we were informed. Can you tell me what the source of that information was?
Staff.
Okay, thank you.
I just had one other question about, I know you're negotiating the LDA from Main Street, and my understanding is you're a couple of weeks out from, maybe a few weeks out from tying that up. When that LDA is done, when you get to that point, does that become public at that point? Will we know what the parameters are of that?
The answer is yes. It will, before it's signed, it'll come before the Select Board.
Okay, and so we'll get that, and then we'll get the Meeting House one whenever that gets done.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Anything else here in the room? Do we have somebody online? Oh, Paulette, yes. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I think we were going to show a flyer for what I was going to announce. I just have a real quick, and there it is. Thank you. I'm with Chatham Recycles, Paulette Failig, and our second annual Fix-It Clinic, which we do with the Eldridge Public Library, is coming up this Saturday, September 28th. It will run from 10:30 till 1 p.m. And Fix-It clinics are also called repair cafes. They're getting to be very popular. It's when you bring broken items, and we have these wonderful volunteer coaches who will fix them for you. We call them coaches because they show you what they're doing with the hopes that next time you can fix it, or at least you'll have a pretty good idea what the problem is. You can bring anything from small appliances, electronics, wooden items, bikes, chairs, lamps, sewing, mending, knitting, fishing equipment, any general household items. We'll have bike repair as well. And these folks are giving their time and being very generous. There are Jacks and Jills of all trades who either love fixing things or just helping to volunteer, help by volunteering. So please join us. We encourage registration. It's not critical. Walk-ins are also welcome. Registration just helps give us an idea of how many people to expect. We'd love to see you this Saturday, 10:30 at the library. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulette. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, sorry. Oh, yes. Is she there?
No, she just asked that the select board read her information.
Oh, no, okay, fine. So Sharon Drown, Town Treasurer, has asked us to share the fact that the fiscal year 2025 real estate and personal property tax bills are being released on October 1, 2024, and will be due by 4 p.m. on November 1, 2024. If you have moved or your mailing address has changed, please notify the assessor's office, the assessing something or other, 508-945-5103 office, as well as the Water Department, 508-945-5155. Okay, thank you very much. And the conservation, I think we already had that one, so we're good. With that, we'll move to public comments on the business agenda, with the exception of the two that I mentioned. And I'm told that Mr. Hallgren may be on, he is indeed online. Mr. Hallgren.
Yes, good afternoon. I would be there in person, but my car's in the shop, sorry. Wanted to speak about item J as far as the Oktoberfest. Six quick points as far as the fee and so on. I attend only to listen to the Chatham band. Now, I think the band certainly would deserve $5, but since it's not they are not being paid by the chamber to pay, you know, I would certainly give the band itself $5, but I don't think it's worth it just for me to pay $5 to hear the Chatham band. I think they should instead have a donation box like they do for the Festival of the Arts. I think that would be okay. There's also multiple access points from Main Street to the park. So how do they plan to stop people from going in from the side? There's, you know, you almost have to fence it off to be secure. I believe it will reduce attendance if we had that fee versus the donation. I doubt that it's also legal based upon the packet, the information, the deed, the rules of the park. And I've also spoken with Tom Janke and Sally from the band, and they certainly don't agree with it. So just wanted to throw that in for your consideration later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hallgren. Anybody else? Ms. Gibbs?
Yes, thank you. I have two comments. One is on agenda item 4D, and that's the considering acceptance of the $10,000 donation for the removal of trees in the harbor. This is the same owner at 97 Tipley, where his it came before the board a couple weeks ago on the road plates, and you deferred that. There was a contractor supposed to sign. I'm a little confused by this. It says the town plans to utilize the donated funds to hire a contractor equipped with a barge and crane to safely remove these challenging trees. And we don't even know what the cost of that's going to be. You know, the idea that we have to hire, the town has to hire a barge, that's taxpayer money. And it says, should this donation not be accepted, the town will likely incur additional costs for the removal of these hazardous trees. I'm not fully up on property owner insurance, but it seems to me that that's what liability insurance is for, that this property owner has had this problem for a long time. And it seems to me premature to accept a donation which would preclude our ability, potentially, to seek additional funds should there be more damage. So I would hope that we defer this until we look into it further to find out, once the project is complete, which I don't believe is going to be until at least October or November, what the long-term liability could be for the town. And if there's any way that private insurance would handle that, and we simply bill a person, you know, I don't see where the town should be paying for this, or the taxpayer should be paying for this. So that's that one item. And I was just going to talk myself on item 4J in terms of closing Cape Gould Park to the public. That's the only gathering place in all of downtown for Oktoberfest where families can just hang out. What concerns me is the goal of the Merchants Association says at the end of the year, the merchants may make charitable contributions to local organizations if and when there's a surplus of funds. So there may not even be any contributions to anybody. And we're certainly capable of making our donations to local organizations ourselves. And we already support the towns by shopping in the stores. And I think the deed's clear. It says no business of any kind should be carried on in that memorial park. So I would agree with Mr. Halgren that donations are appropriate, but I think it's totally inappropriate to close off that park during Oktoberfest. The hours are going to be from 10:30 to 4:30. That's the entire day, and I think that's really inappropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else, either online or in the room? Okay, moving right along. The next item is our business agenda. And the first business agenda item is...
Chairman?
Sorry?
I would like to speak to an article.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your, I was looking for hands raised. Sorry.
Oh, I'm on the phone.
Yeah, go, oh, okay, that makes it difficult.
And I would like to speak to Article J.
Oh, and that's
and I
fine,
just-
could you just identify yourself before you do that, please?
Sure. My name is Eileen Auer, and I have worn a lot of hats in the town. But one hat I wore, and proudly, was I was park commissioner for 21 years. I would like to speak to Article J because it cannot be done. Accepting money in the park is a violation of the will. The park is always to be free. It also would set precedents. It has never been done before. People will not will property if it is not used as donated. We have an atmosphere and respectability of Chatham, and this is part of that. I'm sure the Chatham Chamber moved in this direction unknowingly, but to add to that ad of Oktoberfest, they could just add donation to the public and additional donations acceptable. No wristbands would ever be allowed in the park. You have done it in the past for the alcohol, and that is fine, but let's respect the will of the donor of Wakate Gould Park.
Thank you very much, Ms. Auer, and I'm sorry I didn't see your hand, so to speak. Okay, anybody else? Going once. Moving on to the business agenda, the first item is special town meeting of September 16, recap discussion and any follow-up items. The public is invited to comment alongside. Do we have anybody who wants to venture forth here on the board? Go ahead, Corey.
Sure, no, I think the attendance was greater than I expected. I appreciate the voters that came out that evening and exercised the right to vote. I do think, and I'll put myself out on a limb. I do think the article was worthy of passing. I do think, 90 Bridge Street project has a lot of merit. But I do respect the people that have come up to me after the fact and have made issues about the process. So I think we got to take note of some of that and incorporate some of our thoughts on future actions. But I appreciate the voters coming out. It was a relatively good sized meeting. It wasn't too long. Thank God it wasn't too long because the setup needed a little bit of tweaking. I know us up on the podium had wonderful seats that I hope we can put some money in the budget and replace right away because they were horrible. But no, all kidding aside, I appreciate the event and I'm glad the voters came out and voted, very clearly where they wanted the article to go. So that was my thoughts.
Jeff?
That was a great town meeting. I'm glad that it didn't kind of devolve or evolve into a referendum on the process. I think the project itself was addressed very clearly and certainly resonated with the town. I think the notion that it kind of touched the different strata of the town, those folks interested in historic preservation, those folks interested certainly in an upweller and fishing and shellfishing and the environment and education and culture, et cetera. So I thought the project itself really hit a great tone with the town, number one. Number two, the setup, we couldn't see a screen, and whether we need to see a screen or not, that's so important, but I'm not sure the side of the auditorium and the left side of the auditorium could see the right side of the screen. I just don't think they can. So if we're gonna do visuals, at some point, we gotta figure out how we're gonna do visuals better. Sound was better for us. I know the folks addressed speakers that we could certainly hear, and that had been a complaint in the past. So I thought that was much improved. Certainly appreciated the vote. I thought it was a great town meeting, and let's go.
Cherie?
Yeah, I just want to thank the Chatham voters for coming out. I think it was a good mix of people that were, passionate about history, passionate about the environment, and passionate about the commercial and recreational fisheries. And one of the things I just wanted to note is, this upweller is an investment in the future of Chatham shellfish industry, both commercial and recreational. but it also ensures preservation of our cultural heritage, which I think is really important, and it protects the environment, and secures economic benefits for the generations to come in the town. I particularly see this as moving forward. I was probably the most enthusiastic one on the board when the vote came, but I was very happy to see that we had a positive outcome at a town meeting, and I hope it sets a tone for future engagements where people are coming out more in support of efforts that are going forward for the town. As far as the setup that we were on, yeah, I mean, I'll speak to the town manager separately about some of the issues about the setup, but it wasn't the best that we've had. Thanks.
Thank you. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo comments that have been made. I'll disagree with one thing that Mr. Dykens said in a moment about acoustics. But I was happy with the result. As I think everybody knows, I did not support calling the special town meeting, but I did support the article, and I'm happy that it was passed. I'm always happy when we have a good attendance at town meeting. It is essential to the democracy in this town. And as far as the process, I just wanted to mention that the Finance Committee is going to be taking up on at 1:30 on Tuesday, the 1st of October, the proposal I've put forward to kind of clarify when that process might be used going forward. I want to say something about the acoustics and other logistics. I guess it depended on where you were sitting, because I thought the acoustics were terrible. It was very muffled, that speaker at the end of the, I don't know if you guys heard that, your end, but I found it very difficult to hear what was going on clearly. I'll echo what Corey said about the seating. I hope I never see those white seats again, as I'll stand next time. And about the screen, I don't understand why we can't have a screen like that in front of the select board and the finance committee, so we can see what everybody else is seeing. And it's very difficult where the chair and I were sitting to crane our necks and turn around and see the votes. So, and I did mention these things to Jill, so hopefully we can get this clarified. But I do think there should be a screen in front of us, and hopefully we can get this addressed in time for the annual town meeting in May. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As tempting as it is to get into the process question that Dean mentioned and that Corey referred to, we'll have that discussion. I was very pleased with the outcome because we got something done, and we got it done in a crisp and expeditious way that's needed. We were in the middle of the project. There were risks that were being addressed by our moving to a special town meeting that really were real. And I think that it's a good thing when we can get together, have a good discussion, and have a good solid result like that. By the way, the people who've spoken to me about it, interestingly enough, they tell me that we responded and they taught us something that we needed to learn, which is exactly what I thought was the reason why that town meeting made sense, and that is that we responded to the desire to have the projects broken apart. We responded to having a little bit more definitive explanation of exactly what was being done and what the cost was going to be. Happily, the staff was able to work their magic a little bit and reduce the cost of this part of the project. All of those were things that I think were messages that people wanted to communicate at the annual town meeting, and I hope that we got that message, and I would assign that at least as part of the reason why we were successful. So I thought it was a good town meeting. I would make one correction, Dean. It wasn't hard to see it was impossible, yeah. But those are things that I'm sure that staff will work out, and will be in high cotton in May at the annual town meeting, so thank you. And with that, I will welcome any comments from the public, either here in the room or online. And I see, Ms. Gibbs, go ahead.
My comments are short. I would agree with the sound system. It's terrible. The people in the audience couldn't hear. Everything was muffled. It was hard to hear if, the financial report, the finance committee. And the only microphone that's good is the one at the podium, except it's way too short. If you're over 4 feet, it's really hard to, you have to sort of crouch. So if that microphone could be better, and then the remote ones have to be a lot better. It was not good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Mr. Hallgren.
Yes, speaking as someone who attends the meeting simply as a non-voter, but so I sit up in the peanut gallery up there. We know it's not nosebleed, but the ability to see the screen for the visuals is, from that distance, pretty much almost impossible. I think when people put their presentations together, they need to consider that it needs to be very large print, probably similar to what almost the closed captioning is doing. Because there are times when in the meeting room you're in right now, it's difficult to see them. But at that distance, and there were voters that were next to me, and they said, we can't see anything. So just think about that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else online? You see anybody, Katie? Okay. Okay, good discussion. Next case, Mr. Faley is going to present or introduce Weston and Sampson, I presume, with their hydraulic analysis presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rob Faley, Director of Public Works. So this is really a revitalization of the 2019 study that Weston and Sampson had done, but a lot has changed to our water in the meantime. So Weston and Sampson has looked at where we've been and things to consider for the future. Without further ado, I'll introduce Cassandra Albrecht and Leah Stanton from Weston and Sampson to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. As Rob said, my name is Cassandra Albrecht. I'm a project engineer with Weston and Sampson.
And I'm Leah Stanton, and I've been in front of you in the past.
All right. So this is just a brief agenda. We're looking at about a 10-minute presentation, maybe a little shorter. So just to introduce you to this analysis, as Rob mentioned, it's kind of a renewal of 2019 efforts. I think many of you are familiar with Chatham's water supply, but we'll just do a brief overview of it to bring the context back to the forefront. We looked at Chatham's population trends moving forward with this update, as well as how that relates to Chatham's water demands. And then that kind of concludes in the final agenda point, which is the meat of this presentation, which is related to Chatham's future water supply capacity. So the goal of our analysis this time around was to incorporate the latest data from 2019 through 2023 and 2024 thus far, and determine whether the town of Chatham has adequate supply to support current and future water demands. And this has numerous components to it, including the water supplies, population and demand data, seasonal considerations, which are a big part of Chatham's water supply and demand, and then impacts that water conservation may have. So as I mentioned, I'll go through this briefly. Chatham's water supply, there are 11 groundwater wells, and that's largely the focus of this discussion. There are 2 water storage tanks, 2 emergency interconnections, and then 1 water treatment plant. So more specifically with the groundwater wells, as the select board may be familiar with, There are 11 total groundwater wells as of recently this year. So there's the South Chatham well field, which is wells 1 through 3. There is well 4, which was out of service for about 2 decades, but it was brought back online in 2021. There's the training field well field, which is wells 5 and 8. In 2021, wells 5 and 8 were both taken offline due to PFAS. Temporary treatment was installed for well 5 to be able to continue operating. And so that's been well 5 has still been operating since then, but well 8 has been offline since 2021, while a water treatment plant is under construction for those 2 wells. Then there's wells 6, 7, and 9, which are treated at the Morton Road water treatment plant. And then the latest is wells 10 and 11. They were both recently constructed. Well 11 was operating this summer in 2024, and well 10 is not yet online, but is anticipated to be online soon. So we looked at Chatham's population trends in the 2019 analysis we did. We had done this back then, but we did a renewal of that because it has been 5 years since then. So there's 2 pieces to Chatham's population. There's the year-round population, which is pretty consistent. And we used the Metropolitan Area Planning Council's projections from August of 2023. And that's what you see on this graph here is just the year-round population. And generally the trend to be, or the takeaway from this is that, you know, generally Chatham's population year-round is anticipated to remain fairly steady. MAPC shows a slight decline through 2040, but I would take that, you know, generally just consistent. There's not expecting to be a large decline or a large increase as either. But an important note for Chatham is that Chatham has a very high summertime transient population. So many folks that come to Chatham during, you know, warmer weather months, that is not factored into this year-round population. You know, these are folks that are here, you know, May through September, May through October. And that is, we've typically factored that in to be about 30,000 people in our estimations. And I'll discuss that in a little bit. We also looked at Chatham's average and maximum day water demands back starting in 2015 through 2023. And so you'll see that the average day demands are the bottom line on this graph, and they're in blue. And they have remained fairly consistent, you know, between 1.2 and 1.4 million gallons per day. And I'd like to note, so the way that average day demand is calculated is it's a 365-day average. So, you know, the demand from every single day of the year is added together and then divided. And so that remains fairly steady, and that is more reflective of like a year-round type demand, right? Because you're averaging numbers that are pretty low in December with demands that are higher like in the middle of July. And then the maximum day demands is the green line. And those, in this graph, you can see they fluctuate a bit more significantly. And this is the demand from the single highest day from that year, which is why they fluctuate more. So it's not an average, it's just a one-day demand. And you can see, you know, it's ranged from 3.45 MGD in 2021. The highest in recent history was in 2015 at 4.18. But generally, you know, that can fluctuate a lot more based on environmental conditions. You can envision a wetter summer. You might have you wouldn't experience quite a high demand as you might in a very dry summer where your highest demand day might be much, much more. So this is just meant to depict the trends. And then we used the projected population to project demands. And we do this by incorporating per capita water usage, as well as unaccounted for water percentage. And there's a typical methodology for this. So we typically factor in 10% unaccounted for water and a per capita of 65 gallons per capita per day. And so you can kind of see, similar to the population trends, it's not expected to vastly change from its current pattern, as the population trend is not expected to change from its current pattern from the previous slides. But I did want to point out for the maximum day demand, there's kind of that trend line in the middle that is meant to depict what the average might be, but we certainly anticipate the maximum day demands to continue fluctuating, like that dashed line shows. It's not going to flatten out in any respect. It'll kind of trend with the times of environmental conditions. And I also just wanted to note here, I know that the select board in January of this year adopted a year-round housing goal of 200 additional housing units over the next 5 years. And I just wanted to put into perspective, what that might look like and how that would impact here, because you might be wondering, how that impacts population. And so we would anticipate, given, a typical 65 gallons per capita per day, that's just about like over 5 years would be about 0.013 million gallons per day. So kind of on the scale of this graph, it's a very small value. So could be a potential increase, but certainly is not expected to tip the scales. So this next slide shows just how seasonal Chatham's water usage is due to that summertime transient population and also outdoor watering. So each of these lines is a year, starting in 2014 and going through 2023. And the x-axis is January through December, and this just shows the average water pumped per month through those years. So you can see that it's really peaking from June through August. And then, in January, February, November, December, it's much lower. And so it's important that we focus on those summer months when we're considering availability of water in Chatham.
You have outdoor water usage up there as a bullet point.
Yes.
Does this graph show us that somehow or other?
So it doesn't show it separately, but I would say, you don't anticipate outdoor watering to be occurring in January, February, November, December, those months. So this peak you're seeing is both a result of the additional population as well as the outdoor water usage.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we decided to focus on 3 recent years that show kind of a variety of environmental conditions, 2020, 2021, and 2022, because these kind of each depict different years. So 2021, correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, I'm forgetting exactly which year is which, but 2021 was a wetter year, compared to others. 2022 was a drier year. And then 2020 was kind of a middle year, but as we all know, that was during the pandemic, which has its own impacts. So we decided to look at these 3 years kind of as a case study out of this full graph. This chart is meant to depict, it's meant to compare these 3 years to the max days of those years, but it warrants a little explanation. So where one of the explanations is, whereas the trend lines are average water pumped, the dashed lines are actually showing that max day for each year. And so it appears that, the average water pump was not meeting the max day, but certainly on those max days, the water pumped was meeting demand. So Chatham was not lacking in availability of water on those days. But it also shows how changes in recent years in the max days, I think I have 2 of those labels in the wrong place. Do you want to go, Leah?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this slide. So Chatham is a groundwater community. You need to pump your maximum day demand at all times. You have storage out in the distribution system, but that doesn't help you on that max week, those max few days. And it's not a max day. It's not like it's a max day and it goes away. It's a max week, it's a max 2 week, it's a max 3 week. So we need to get the distribution tanks filled at the end of the day, every day, so that you can be ready for the next day. So you have no storage per se in the ground. So you need to be able to pump the max day all the time. That's why this graph is so important, and that's why Cassandra is kind of honing us in on that max day, if that helps frame it up at all.
All right. Okay, so this chart is comparing the max day demand to expected source withdrawals, so withdrawals from those wells. Interesting. All right, now it's all there. So that left graph is showing typical max day demand, and it's from 2020 through 2022. So it's that range of 3.45 MGD to 4 MGD. With all sources active, what we found is that Chatham can have an expected capacity to pump of 4.1 MGD. So comparing 4.1, that's slightly above 4, which was the max day demand in 2020, and then 3.45 is a minimum, so a bit more of a buffer there. This 4.1 MGD does include wells 10 and 11, even though they weren't online during previous years before this year. It also includes wells 5 and 8, because in the future that water treatment plant will be constructed and those wells will be back online. And then that far right light blue is depicting the all sources without the largest source. So we like to consider redundancy. If you consider perhaps Chatham has one well down, the largest source to be the most conservative for any number of reasons. We've seen in the past several years because of PFAS or something else, maintenance needs. We'd like to consider that. And so for 2020 through 2022, that was well 7. But I will say a lot of Chatham's wells produce a very similar amount of water, so it could kind of be swapped in and out. But if you look at that number, it's 3.58 MGD. And so that brings kind of the conservative level of what Chatham could expect to provide down from that 4.1. And so the takeaway from this is that, Chatham's max day demands in recent history have been quite high and kind of reach near what the max capacity of the wells are. This is just kind of a summary of what I just said. So then this slide looks at the impact of water conservation and how that has the potential to, bring that max day down to help Chatham be further underneath its ability to pump, to have more of that buffer. So 2016 and 2022 were the most recent drought years. 2016 had a 48-week-long drought. There were no mandatory outdoor watering restrictions implemented that year, and it had a higher yearly total withdrawal from wells than previous or following years, which is to be expected during a drought. Your grass isn't as green, and so you're probably watering more. In 2022, it was 31 weeks long, so it was shorter, but still a significant drought. The biggest difference is that Chatham enacted mandatory outdoor watering at the end of July, and it actually experienced the lowest yearly total withdrawal from the wells since 2013, despite being a drought year. So this graph on the right compares 2016 to 2022 total water pumped from June through August, which is, when the demands are the highest. And you can see how significantly lower the green bar, which is 2022, is than the blue bar, especially in August, right after the mandatory watering restrictions were enacted. And so using the comparison of these 2 years, we estimate that Chatham could save approximately 0.6 MGD, million gallons per day during the summer months by implementing outdoor watering restrictions. So then if we add that into this chart, that's the blue bar, you really significantly decrease the range of maximum day demands you might see by implementing those outdoor watering restrictions. So now our worst case demand condition is closer to 3.4 MGD instead of 4 MGD. And you can see compared to the 2 blue bars that we're below what Chatham can expect to pump from its wells, both with the all sources active scenario as well as the sources without the largest source in service. So quite a significant expected decrease. So that leads kind of to our final slide, which is kind of like a threefold of recommendations. So as we just looked at, the water conservation and outdoor watering restrictions seems like it could have a very large impact, and it did in 2023, or 2022, sorry. So we recommend that Chatham maintains this tool of outdoor watering restrictions. We expect that it'll be within Chatham's upcoming new Water Management Act permit. It'll be a requirement within that Chatham has outdoor watering restrictions during certain conditions. This will help to manage the water demands during dry summertime conditions when both people are using the most amount of water and the aquifer is at its lowest because it's, potentially dry. And regularly exercising this tool instead of using it periodically will help improve customer buy-in. They'll be more used to it. And as a part of this, it could be very beneficial to implement a public awareness campaign, educating the customers on how outdoor watering can help them, how they can comply with the requirements, and just overall improve water usage in Chatham. Kind of on a similar note is looking into a townwide water conservation plan. So beyond just outdoor watering, there's also, Chatham's increase in summertime usage due to the transient population. And so there could be an investigation into usage, like how much of that usage in the summer is coming from outdoor watering and how much is coming from the increase in population. And that would help focus the town's efforts on where to implement conservation. And it can also focus on reducing year-round usage in addition to outdoor watering. So potentially implementing water-saving appliances, water-efficient appliances, as well as the outdoor watering. And then finally, another piece is Chatham could begin engineering for additional water supply sources. So Chatham has had a mindset in the past several years of continuously investing in water supply and treatment systems. But the biggest caveat with this is that, there's the consideration of the potential for high cost with a new well, of course. Wells 10 and 11 are expected to produce each about 500,000 gallons per day. But any new well is expected to come with significant treatment costs with iron and manganese and PFAS. And so that's a big piece to that, where if you look at the other options of water conservation, you might save 0.5, 0.6 MGD with the outdoor watering restrictions, but that would come at, much reduced costs because you don't have to build a treatment plan and do all this well exploration. So that is the end of our presentation. I'd like to open it up for questions.
Yeah, that was
Sorry,
really,
Jeff.
Thank you. That was really very clear. The written material is very clear, and the presentation was excellent. What I take away is that the restrictions are very effective. We saw the impact in August very, very clearly, and the graph showed it. But I have two specific questions, and if we're going to plan for max demand, the 4.0 absent restrictions, assume that. Do we need another well, number one, and number two, could we fill another storage tank? And is that an avenue that we should consider?
I think you need to start looking, we think you need to start looking for another source, right? That doesn't mean next year, that doesn't mean 2 years. It's gonna take you 3 to 5 years if you started now. So always planning out for the future and looking to the future is always a solid part of managing a water system. The tanks don't, the distribution tanks can't, it isn't a long-term solution to manage your maximum day demands. So you need to get those tanks backfilled every day. That's what we say, every day. So it doesn't happen every day, and I can tell you as a water operator and somebody who manages the system, when those tanks are not filled by 4 a.m., there is stress in that. So I do not believe that adding more distribution storage helps you. It actually kind of hurts you, especially in the wintertime, because you're going to struggle with some of that.
So that answer is very helpful to me. I find the differential between 4.1 and 4 to be too small. Even with restrictions, the 3.38 versus 4 maximum is still kind of small. So we've discussed here many times, I've asked the question quite a few times on, do we need another well, and should we be pursuing, future wells? And I'm on the side, I think we ought to be. I think we ought to be always pushing the envelope in terms of new water sources. Anyway, I really appreciated the presentation. Thank you very much.
Corey?
Thank you. Now, bear with me, I'm going to try to not botch this question up. So we look at the summer usage data, all the chart that was couple slides back with all the lines going up and down. 2021-22, correct me if I'm wrong, that was right about the time we were pushing for individuals who had irrigation systems to either put a separate meter on or basically get pulled off the town system. So I'm assuming that some of this data is going to reflect that we know, and we don't probably have a hard inventory of how many households have done this, taking their system completely off the town infrastructure. So you had a property that at one point was pumping, the irrigation summer after summer after summer, and maybe in 2020 or 2021, they've cut themselves off, put their own well in, and they're off the system. But we have other growth of other houses and usage going on that kind of offsets that. So we're not really gaining much. So how does all that kind of factor into, how does individual households that have irrigation systems that are going on to their own private wells help or hurt this whole long-term, plan?
Well, it would come across as less water pumped from Chatham's wells, of course, but acknowledging that they're likely taking from the same aquifer
Right.
as the town's wells are. So, it's hard to exactly calculate the impact of that, but I would say that's certainly a factor. You're not kind of out of the woods if every customer gets their own well to feed their irrigation system, right? Because that's just going to probably lower the amount that you can pump, that Chatham can pump from its wells, if it is in the same aquifer. But yeah, probably it could contribute, but I think you spoke as well to the fact, there's new homes that are not using that same methodology, and so it kind of probably evens out there.
Okay, so it would be safe to say, as an example, a campaign to encourage more people to go onto their own wells, to take themselves off the town infrastructure really isn't a great long-term benefit to the town. It would be a little bit of a help, but it's not something that would have a lot of merit in having such a strong campaign and doing something like that, I guess.
So I love this graph. Do you see that peak for every year? You have to plan for the driest year, for the maximum demand, for your largest source out of service. That's what, as a responsible water supplier, that's what you plan for, because there's no option of failure here. You have to supply water, okay? You are paying for that dearly. To get that peak, the capital costs are significant because you have to build it. But none of the operating revenues are there. The operating revenues are on the base load, right? So in Chatham, for what you all are dealing with, you want to make that as flat as you can, in my opinion, because every peak, as the peak goes higher, you will have to spend capital monies doing that, if that helped. I know Rob is.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, just to address your question, Corey. Yep. So the private wells are for irrigation purposes only.
Right.
They're not putting treated water on the ground. It takes a lot of stress off of the town system because we're treating the water with chemicals. We're pumping it out of the ground. We're storing it. We're transporting it. So all that stuff it does take it out of the same aquifer, but it would relieve the pressure on Chatham's water system immensely.
So there is some level of benefit with that type of concept program.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Sheree?
Thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate the differential on the engineering for additional water, that looking for new well sites is probably the way to go in building for that. However, I think after hearing that we need to tamp down this higher usage, I think equally important is the water restrictions and the conservation plan. And maybe that is, building that campaign is a really important component to the bigger picture of everything. We're a pretty consumer-driven society now, and, I feel like this is one of those spaces where we can continue to educate our residents and our part-time residents in what we need on this really fragile area we live in.
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. And I understand this is going to be, where's Rob? He's no longer, oh, there he is. This is going to be, I know the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee heard a preliminary version of this, but they haven't really discussed it in detail or come up with a recommendation back to the Select Board. I assume they're going to come back to us before we should, I think, take any action on this. Is that correct?
Right, so Leah had presented an executive summary back, I think it was February. But this has been polished and finalized, so we wanted to have the Select Board take a look at it first.
Okay.
And then we'll present it to the.
Because it's been on their agenda pretty much, but they've
It
been
has been. They've
focused
been-
on grinder pumps.
Exactly, that's.
Thank you. A couple of points, and they're different. On the, Leah, you mentioned the operating revenues and capital costs, but my understanding is that capital costs are borrowed and bonded, and those bonds are paid for out of the operating revenues, are they not? They're not paid for out of the general tax.
You're correct.
Okay.
Water rates, yep.
Okay, the water rates. As far as the private wells versus the town wells and coming from the same aquifer, Dr. Duncanson on numerous occasions pointed out that because the town's wells are much deeper, they're drawing from different strata of the aquifer. Is that correct? So I was always under the I was given the impression from that the private wells don't really derogate from the town's ability to draw water. Is that not a correct assumption?
It's the same aquifer.
Right.
So we'd have to do, in my opinion, I think it's the same aquifer. So that's the reason I hesitated on Corey's question. So when the private homeowners are pulling out of the aquifer, you're not getting the operating revenues, but they're still affecting the aquifer. But on the other hand, to Rob's point, you are paying dearly to treat that water.
Yes.
Which is the operating cost, not the capital cost. And to put that on the ground it's a little,
It's wasteful.
it's wasteful.
Yeah.
Especially, and as Chatham enters into PFAS treatment with granular activated carbon, it is going to be doubly so, if that
Yeah.
makes sense to you.
The town has historically encouraged people to have private wells for irrigation purposes, and I think that's probably should continue, that encouragement. There are some properties where it's not possible to drill a well because of the sand, so we have to be sensitive to that as well. I wanted to ask a question, and this issue is going to spill over into the next item on our agenda. This town has a real problem in terms of how much we do, how much are we supposed to do to make it a welcoming community for the summer population. I've been here, I'm in my 31st year. This summer was the most challenging summer for a year-round or even a summer resident in this town. Traffic-wise, walking down Main Street, we had more people than I think the town could handle. And so this is a good example. This is a metaphor of the challenge we face. How much do we invest in infrastructure, whatever type of infrastructure, to accommodate this challenge? And are we sort of, chasing a never-ending proposition here? So I'm really becoming more concerned about this. And I'm with Jeff Dykens. I think we should be looking for another well. I'm really happy that we finally got 10 and 11, you know, back online now, not back online for the first time. You addressed, and I asked this question at the Water and Sewer Committee when you made your presentation, the projection for new affordable housing, which is 200 units. But you said that that the usage is 65 gallons per capita. So did you include in that calculation that there may be more than one person per unit? I don't think it's probably going to matter very much, but.
Right, so I think that calculation was assuming 1 per unit, which could be under the average.
Yeah.
So if you were to assume, 1.5 or 2, even 2, that value would increase. But with the 200, if it is 200 people multiplied by 65, and then you're assuming over 5 years, that's when you get the 0.013 MGD. So if you assume perhaps that doubles, it's 0.026 MGD.
It's still a relatively insignificant.
So it's still relatively small when you
Yeah.
consider, how much how much more water you need for watering. Like your year-round housing is probably it's gonna slightly maybe increase those baseline numbers, but I don't anticipate it'll be like, increasing the peak or having nearly as much of an impact as the watering does.
Thank you. The year before, I think it was, we instituted the mandatory restrictions, or maybe it was the same season. We had voluntary restrictions. Do you have any thoughts on those, on that modem, that model?
Well, pretty shortly, it's going to be,
Mandatory.
you're going to be told what you, by the regulators, what you need to do for watering restrictions. So I think that mandatory is a lot more effective than voluntary, especially if you drive around Chatham, you can see there's a lot of people watering their lawns and they're not there. They're not even there to change the programming to stop it. So I think mandatory is more effective.
Okay. Well, again, I appreciate the report. I think it's good that we are now all able to see this in living color, as it were. And I agree with what Shireen said, that, we should, and we're now going to be told what we're going to have to do. We should always encourage prudent use of our water, but we need to be prepared, as you point out. And I don't think there's a huge enough margin with just 11 wells. That's why I think we should start looking pretty quickly for an additional source of water supply for the town. But thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So I think the thing we can all agree on is that margin is inadequate. I mean, it's actually a little bit scary. But I also think that we don't necessarily have to address this in only one way. I think, I agree. Let's go look for a new well field for the future as quickly as possible. But I want to come back to the estimate that you've incorporated here on what the benefit of the restrictions was. And you've said it's roughly 0.62. That, as I understand it, is all coming out of town water that's being pumped, number one. And number two, I'm going to assume that most, if not all, virtually all of that is outdoor watering. And so, and you can quarrel with that or not as you see fit. I don't want to get into a big debate about how much is it, 0.48 or 0.62 or whatever. It's a big number. I personally think that the initiative to get irrigation systems off of town water and onto private wells. Again, you're obviously much more experts than we are, but I think it's open to additional study exactly what the impact is on the aquifer between what we're pumping and what a private irrigation well is pumping. And we can, and by the way, if that's not a reason not to get off of the town water, that's a reason why you would regulate all water, including private wells, to protect the aquifer. And I don't know what the Water Usage Act is going to do, but I suspect it may address both private and public, or if not, it may think about it down the road. I just think that that it just, and now I come to your point, Leah, that we are paying, I don't care how we're paying, whether it's capital costs or operating whatever, we're paying to maintain that top level of capacity, where, you know, what the system delivers in terms of revenues is key to something other than that. Makes sense. And that, to me, just means we shouldn't be paying for equipment and infrastructure for people to water their lawns. I mean, to me, that's an inescapable conclusion. I appreciate, number one, it's not absolutely irrefutable. It's worthy of discussion, and you may have some different views on that, and I know the town has different views on that. There are different views around this table, I suspect. But I do think that, as a very clear proposition, needs to be on the table and part of this discussion. So those are my comments. If you want to say anything about it, you're welcome to, but that's kind of my view of the world.
So you asked us many, unfortunately, years ago to tell you if you needed another source, okay? So we've done all of this number crunching and tried to take all of this complex usage data, weather data, and boil it down and tell you that. And the answer to the question is yes, okay? But it isn't the only answer. It's an and. You need to be doing all of it, right? All together, all in harmony. So, yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions here?
Very good.
Yeah, excellent. Very provocative, in the best sense of the term.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to clarify, is the board comfortable with not taking any action on this tonight, but waiting to hear back from Water and Sewer?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm comfortable, but it begs the question, what action would you
I don't know.
consider?
Well, I don't know.
We should invite them to be on the agenda at some point, you know,
Yeah.
when they're done with their musings and they have a recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next is the presentation and review of the final draft of the Housing Production Plan. And I'm going to introduce Gloria McPherson to introduce our experts. I do want to say, and they will elaborate, but this plan has been in the works, I think, since January. It was the subject of numerous meetings with the Affordable Housing Trust Board, back and forth, comments, et cetera. Community Housing Partnership has had a role in commenting and input. Last night, there was a very thorough discussion at the Planning Board. The Affordable Housing Trust Board did approve and recommend this draft, subject to final comments and input from both the Planning Board and this Select Board. But I just want people to understand that this has been thoroughly masticated up to this point, and it's now ready for consumption here. And with that, I will pass the baton to you, Gloria.
Thank you. That was pretty much what I was going to say. To give you the background, thank you for saying it probably more succinctly than I would have. The only thing I want to add to that is that the last time the town of Chatham did a housing production plan was 2018. The horizon for housing production plans, which are part of Chapter 40B in statute, is 5 years, so we're a little bit behind schedule doing this, but fortunately, in the FY24 grant round, we were able to get a $57,000 community planning grant to do this, so I guess waiting a little longer was probably worth it. Yeah, I just wanted to comment that in the 2018 plan, there were a lot of strategies laid out, and in reviewing that, it was really obvious that the town has made a lot of progress. I like to say that before I got here, you guys set the table for all of the housing work that we're doing now. And hopefully the 2024 plan will really be able to coalesce and focus what we're going to do to move forward. And with that, I'm going to introduce our consultant, Laura Smead from J.M. Goldson.
Welcome,
Thank
Laura.
you very much. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen for my presentation. And in light of, I know you have a very busy agenda, I'm going to move through this as quickly as I can, but feel free to interrupt me at any time. Otherwise, there's always room for discussion at the end. Okay, so tonight I'm just going to give a little introduction and overview to the process that we went through, provide some highlights of the housing needs that we've noticed through our community engagement process and the data itself, walk through the goals and really high level some of the strategy buckets. I'm not going to articulate every single one of the 44 or so odd strategies, but in the discussion portion, if there's anything you want to dive into, I'm happy to do so. And then, of course, we are hoping for a vote of adoption of the plan, and that will, barring any final, edits or comments, and that would enable the town to submit this to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities for their final approval. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board, the Community Housing Partnership, the housing staff, you all and the Planning Board and the Select Board and the town public itself. It's really taken a team effort to put this together and have all the careful review and revisions that it's had. And in the housing needs assessment, we did work with the RKG Associates as well on some of that data gathering. So housing production plans are, as Gloria mentioned, a town-wide 5-year roadmap for housing. Well, it has to be consistent with the Chapter 40B guidelines, and it is meant to help you improve your subsidized housing inventory and get you closer to that 10% of your overall year-round housing stock to be deed-restricted affordable housing. It really goes beyond that. It's about market rate housing, attainable housing, and affordable housing altogether. And it does need both Planning Board and Select Board adoption before that EOHLC approval. So some benefits of a housing production plan are, of course, better understanding your local housing needs and really helping you focus what resources and decisions you want to make and when moving forward through an action plan that we also provide in this document. It helps you with some enhanced coordination to help you get that incremental housing production that you need to meet your housing demand and housing needs. So the plan, sometimes communities have both of these housing needs assessments and the goals and strategies all in one document, but Chatham has it in two, and that's fine. The housing needs assessment deep dives into all the data and the charts and community engagement and so forth. And then the housing production plan has that needs assessment in an executive summary form, and then it outlines the goals and strategies and an action plan for the next 5 years. So the framework that we used was we always wanted to start with the needs. What are the top housing issues identified in the housing needs assessment, and what goals then are going to help address those needs, and then the strategies are the methodology for helping achieve the goals. We started back in January and into the spring doing some pretty robust community engagement, and also looking at both the qualitative data from the community engagement and the quantitative data from different database sources like the American Community Survey or census data or other kind of HUD data and economic data, and all these data sources you can find listed in the plan. And from that, we worked first with the various groups on outlining the goals and strategies that we wanted to pursue. And then we drafted the narratives for that and revised that several times to get to the point where we are now with the final presentation. So for community engagement, we had about 655 total participation points. We talk about them as participation points because different individuals may participate in more than one thing, and since we don't track the individual across, every single thing, we talk about it more as in just points of participation. If those points were individuals, that would represent roughly just shy of 10% of your year-round population, and that's a very strong turnout. That's very good. We do aim to be about 10% of a population when we're trying to get a good, robust sample from a community. And from what the community said, about half of the survey respondents indicated that they could not afford to move to Chatham today. Some of the more pressing challenges that were flagged were a lack of year-round rental, a lack of affordable and attainable housing. So not just the deed-restricted affordable, but really for market rate, there's a big gap between people who might not make too much to qualify for deed-restricted affordable, but don't make nearly enough to meet what the market has for housing. There were also some key areas for development flagged in the community engagement that we were able to incorporate into some of the future study areas. We already know that you're working on some zoning initiatives, especially in West Chatham, for example. In terms of housing opportunities, people think there is an opportunity to allow for more different types of housing, to regulate short-term rentals, to permit accessory units or accessory dwelling units, which the state now has the Affordable Homes Act, so that is now allowed by right due to a state action, and also building affordable housing on identified town property sites, and that's already kind of in the works as well. More broadly favored are having more flexible zoning, so different incentives for types of housing developments you want to see, more expedited permitting around affordable housing, trying to target strategies toward employee housing, increasing allowable housing densities where there's the infrastructure to support that, as in you have wastewater, sewer, or where you can meet the Title V requirements, and also allowing for more by right multifamily in some of those targeted zones where you have the infrastructure to support that. Really high-level recap of some of the housing needs from a database perspective. There isn't a lot of housing diversity in Chatham. It's mostly single-family and it's mostly owner-occupied. There also is not enough year-round housing for the demand, with half of your housing stock is kind of only part-time in use, very seasonal community, as you know. And there's also 1,450 short-term rental units. There seems to also be a mismatch between the types of sizes of households and the availability of smaller units. And not that there's anything wrong with smaller households living in a larger home. It's more that, do they have an opportunity to downsize? Is there an opportunity to have a more naturally occurring housing, which comes along with a smaller size unit? And then, of course, no surprise to anyone, the high housing costs, especially recently in the last 5 years. So this is a snapshot in time, of course, but it's about $1.3 million for a single-family home median sales price in Chatham, and that would require an income of around $300,000 or so to be able to afford that kind of a mortgage. This is back of the napkin, but it does give you an idea. And then for the monthly rent for a 2-bedroom, this is more of a regional data since it's hard to get rental market rate data for the Outer Cape especially. We're looking at about $2,000 for a 2-bedroom rent. So as a consequence of that, you have a fair amount of cost-burdened households. So more than a third of the community is paying more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. And at the same time, your subsidized housing inventory, that deed-restricted units is at 4.8%, and you're striving to get to 10%. But you can see that even if you got to 10%, the need goes above and beyond even what the state requires. And while you have had an increase in your year-round population in the last 10 years or so, I think some of that is, there's more hybrid work now. It's a popular place to come retire. The sort of remote work and things like that has enabled more people to live here year-round. But there has been this atrophy over time of families with children and in your schools, as well as the kind of prime working years population of 35 to 44 years old. So there's a concern, I know, in the community about how do we help make it a livable place for people who want to work in Chatham and live in Chatham as well, and help families with children live here as they used to. So you have a housing availability and a cost crisis, not unique to Chatham, but really exacerbated in the Cape, with this mismatch between the housing supply and the housing need, affecting all housing types and all income levels up to more than about 200% of the area median income. That's what AMI stands for. So that in Chatham is around, it could be like $200,000. It's a pretty high number, and it's still unaffordable. Seasonal housing is prevalent, and year-round rentals, especially in multifamily housing, it's harder to find. And as a consequence, workers are unable to live near their jobs. And since your community is really dependent on tourism and seasonal workforce, and of course, your teachers and nurses and health providers and things like that, you really want to be able to support all employees, year-round employees as well, to live in the community. So how do we get there? There are 7 housing goals. The first one is about the housing stock itself, different housing types, to try to create more housing diversity. So creating, conserving, and converting year-round housing stock for a range of income levels and housing types. And this is a graphic that I think many of you have probably seen before about the concept of a missing middle housing type from Union Studio. So it could be anything from an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard or a granny flat, all the way up to kind of a smaller scale walk-up apartment model where you might have a condo or an apartment in that. But it's all of a range and a type that could fit in Chatham. We also want to try to ensure that there are housing opportunities that are affordable for Chatham's year-round residents and workers. And on the flip side of that, you also want to try to house Chatham's seasonal workforce. So that workforce that spikes in the summer months, there's a lot of folks who are trying to find housing and sometimes are finding housing in really difficult circumstances and sometimes even unsafe circumstances, and employers are struggling to find enough people and how to house them and so forth. So trying to think of creative ideas to house your seasonal workforce. And then trying to strategically locate the new housing to minimize barriers to development. So Chatham has a lot of wonderful open space and the beach, but that does come with areas you want to protect. And so looking to where you want to grow, it's going to be where you are in a neighborhood center or where there's already wastewater infrastructure, or where you're planning on building wastewater in the relatively near future. You also want to continue to maximize local interest in investment in affordable and attainable housing. And interest can be in the form of education and communication, and investment can be in terms of staff, volunteer time, and funding. All of that is needed in order to make progress on affordable and attainable housing. You have some wonderful regional and local resources. that you've worked with before, and we want to encourage you to work with in the future. That can really help increase your capacity and coordinate, because the housing challenges that Chatham faces are faced by the entire Cape Cod region. And so there's a real opportunity to work together and do more as a regional approach. And finally, last but not least, looking to do that incremental increase the subsidized housing inventory units, those deed restricted units, so that you are helping to take care of some of the more lower income and most vulnerable people, as well as, of course, meeting the requirements of Chapter 40B. Okay, so moving on to strategies. There are 3 strategy buckets that go into every kind of housing production plan. While we do provide an action plan, I would encourage you to think about it more like a menu of choices. It's not binding. It's going to take some coordination and prioritization with all of the different boards and committees identified in the action plan to kind of figure out exactly what you want to tackle first, second, and so forth. And you don't have to try to tackle every single thing, although of course it'd be wonderful if you did. But anyway, that's just the caveat, a little bit of a asterisk on these strategies. So the first bucket, planning, policies, and zoning, is more of a planning and regulatory approaches. So there's a number of zoning changes that we recommend, such as trying to allow for more multifamily housing in certain districts, having more flexible zoning for the types of housing we want to see more of. There's a bunch of different design guidelines and standards that you can explore, beyond which you already have some. But there's others such as ADA visibility or green building design and so forth that you can look to explore either as a guideline or as a standard, as well as continuing to have an inventory of potential housing sites from either town-owned land, which you've already kind of been working on, or private land in, say, commercial districts or on that may have underutilized office building, for example. I'm just making this up hypothetically, but that you can find like, oh, this could be appealing, and trying to promote those spots for housing for developers. And this is just a graphic to illustrate one of the concepts that we recommend, which is called the pattern book. And a pattern book is a visual representation of the zoning code in a way, where it's illustrating in an architectural style the types of housing that the community wants to see, and of which would be more expedited in a permitting sense. So some communities do this in more of just a illustrated general graphic way. Other communities go so far as to have actual architectural designs and plans that are kind of, especially for something like an accessory dwelling unit, that community members can just draw from and use, and then they don't have to pay for an architect to come in and help them design. So there's lots of different examples of ways to do pattern books. They're less commonly done in Massachusetts, but they are done in other states, and so we try to pull together some of those references and resources for you. And then on the right, that is your wastewater map. The red areas are where you already have existing sewer, and the other colors are kind of where you're expanding. So that's just not meant to be exactly readable. It's more just meant to illustrate that you're wanting to think about the additional density and additional housing opportunities and redevelopment in areas with the wastewater capacity to support that. All right, so the bucket number 2, local initiatives and programs. Accessory dwelling units, especially ones that you might be able to have for either year-round tenants or at an affordable level, could really benefit from some additional incentives. So beyond just the zoning, is there a program or a subsidy that could be done to help those be created, especially for if an individual is lower income, or if they're going to rent to year-round tenant and so forth. There's different ideas there. Having tax incentives for year-round rentals, expedited permitting for affordable housing projects, exploring down payment assistance programs and the idea of a lease to locals program. So your just about neighbor over in Provincetown does a lease to locals program where they actually provide cash incentives to convert properties into year-round rentals for locals. And that can help, if the price point is right, it might be able to help draw people away from the kind of short-term rental market into something that could be able to serve a year-round resident. And then on the right is an example from California, but I believe there's even more closer regional examples of programs to help support accessory dwelling units be created. All right, and the third bucket is around capacity, education, and coordination. So as you are exploring and perhaps wanting to implement some more of these programs, it's worth looking at your town staffing. For sure, you want to maintain what you have, but if there's more responsibility and more programmatic things you want to do, there may be a need for additional town staffing. I also love the example of a housing roundtable. I think Concord, Massachusetts was the first one to do that, but it's one of our top recommendations for coordination because it brings together all of the different responsible parties for these housing strategies and puts them together in a room or a virtual room once a quarter to talk through, okay, what are we doing in this next year? What are the top priorities? You know, it really helps you implement the housing production plan, but and other things. So you don't have to tie yourself just to the housing production plan, but anything related to housing. Of course, continuing your regional partnerships and training for your land use permitting boards, and continuing to educate the community on kind of myth busting around affordable housing, things like that, or myth busting around zoning. Having developed communications and education plans can be really helpful in getting things like zoning you want to get passed. So on the left, that's just a graphic about the Concord Housing Roundtable and all the different housing entities they have there. You have many as well. And on the right is an example from the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, or CHAPA. They run a number of different programs. This is just an example of kind of housing diversity myth-busting session. But there's many different organizations that we cite in the plan and that you can tap into, some local ones, of course, as well, to help with your capacity, education, and coordination. And finally, the action plan that we have in the Word document has two different charts. One looks at each strategy across each of the different goals, so you can see which strategies support more than one goal. That could be an interesting angle to try to see where you can get the biggest bang for your buck, as well as looking at each strategy in terms of who's responsible and is it when are you thinking of doing it. Now, that's great, but that's also kind of static in a PDF report. So we're also providing that to you as an Excel document where you can work with it and use it and update it, kind of, especially in the context of something like a housing roundtable, and continue to add to it over time. And that is the heart of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you have on the plan.
Thanks very much, Laura. I'll start with the board. Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for the presentation. The Select Board was provided this for the first time for this meeting, and there's a lot to absorb. I've read both documents, and I must say I think they were very well prepared. They're very easy to read. When I got them on Friday, I was a little daunted because it was about 100 pages, and but they're nicely done. And I like much, if not most, of what you say, but rather than spend time complimenting you on the things that I like, I just wanted to single out two strategies, I guess that's the term, that I have concern about. The first is, and this is on the zoning issue, this is strategy number 6. And I'll just read it, it's 2 sentences. strengthen Chatham's zoning bylaw to allow duplexes by right in all residential zones. Alternatively, consider whether duplexes could be allowed by special permit in all residential zones with a year-round residency requirement. So the first sentence, to me, has a very open-ended potential that I think, depending upon its implementation, could be deleterious to the town. And I mean, it's something that gives me pause in my ability or willingness to approve the document with that in it. And I would need to know more before I can resolve that concern satisfactorily. The second sentence, the special permitting, to me is a little more palatable. I guess I would ideally, it's probably not possible, but I ideally would like to know what our zoning board thinks of that, because they're likely to be the body that's going to implement special permits. I know that planning board can do that too, but they've had decades of experience giving them out. We give out a lot of special permits in this town because we have so many non-conforming properties. In fact, you're at a disadvantage if you have a conforming lot sometimes, and I found that out personally and was told that by a former building commissioner. So I have some concern about that particular requirement, and I shouldn't say requirement, that strategy. The other one is less concerning, but it's something I guess I'll just mention, and that is number 28. This is organize an ad hoc zoning task force to get opinions and input from staff, the community, and other boards on potential revisions and initiatives to produce desired housing types. And maybe I'm looking at that sentence too narrowly, but it would seem to me that, and I speak as someone that thinks we already have too many committees in this town and too many boards, but we do have a planning board, and it would seem to me that body would be the better resource for collecting that type of information. And let me just conclude by commenting and adding one comment on my first item. Rather than having an open-ended by right opportunity to put duplexes, I would prefer the flexible zoning district approach that we have used in various places in this town. And maybe that's more limiting than I think it is, but those are my comments and thoughts. But again, I do think you've done a very comprehensive and thorough job, and you've presented it very, very clearly. So thank you.
Thanks, Dean.
So,
Yeah,
Would you like-
go ahead, Laura.
oh, I was wondering if I should respond. So you didn't articulate kind of what information you might need for the duplexes, but just broadly speaking, zoning, as you know, is just one barrier to be removed when you're creating a new development. So there's environmental considerations, and there's, of course, non-conforming lots and things like that. And as you also mentioned, most of the community, a lot of the community is non-conforming. So even if you do allow something as a right, whether it's going to have enough land to support that number of bedrooms is a question. So even though 68% of your land is zoned for residential use, and that sounds like a lot that could potentially go to a duplex, there's only a subset of those that are going to have the right amount of acreage to support the bedrooms. And the way I look at it too is, if you allow for a four-bedroom single-family home anywhere in your single-family home districts, the same number of bedrooms could be done, like two-bedroom units for a duplex. and it can be done also to look like a single-family home. They can have the same kind of floor area ratio or dimensional considerations that you would do for any of the other single-family homes. Design guidelines can be a part of the question as well. I think that for me, the biggest issue with having duplexes by right in all residential zones is a concern about investors using that as an additional opportunity to put in short-term rentals or something like that. And so it could be worth doing a special permit with a year-round residential requirement or something for that reason. But given that's the discussion I think that you'll have to give me some direction on. Also, we did hear from the planning board that there was an interest in trying to soften the language a little bit around some of these zoning recommendations. Some of the strategies we use language like consider this or explore that, but for the zoning initiatives, we tend to just say it as a straight recommendation. And so I think we were already planning on kind of trying to soften some of that language.
Well, I think if I
And
could,
as I mentioned before, none of the recommendations are binding, and we know that everything was going to have to go through a process with the relevant boards to decide if it's something you want to move forward with.
yeah, I think that first sentence, if it could be qualified by some of the considerations you just mentioned, there would have to be, I mean, right now, the zoning board can award a special permit, and there are 10 or 11 criteria that have to be honored for non-conforming properties, for example. But if, I don't want this to look like we're driving a Mack truck through the zoning bylaw. That's what concerns me about it, because it's just a pretty bald statement. And if it were qualified, it would be more palatable. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Mike. And just to address Dean's concern, I need a little context on what we're doing this evening. We're going to approve it. That doesn't mean, these are all the letter of the land. We have to go through all sorts of hoops. The planning board in particular with the zoning stuff, and the ZBA has to weigh in on this stuff, and then the town has to weigh in on this stuff. So I was impressed with the work here and the presentation, but the work itself, especially on the production plan. I didn't plow through all the housing needs assessment because I think I'm fairly well schooled in that already. But so for this evening, are we going to be asked to vote to approve this plan, knowing that, and to Dean's point, I think it's an important one, knowing that there are scores of hoops to jump through before any of this stuff becomes real. As a paradigm or as concepts, I think they're excellent. I think many of them are excellent.
I'm going to treat that as a question addressed to me,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
definitively, but I'm going to tell you what I think.
Okay.
Because, I mean, obviously, we can't sit here and rewrite this document this evening. I mean, that's clear. And this is probably a lousy metaphor, but it's one that occurs, and I'm going to use it because I don't have a better one. I think what this gives us is a palette with a whole array of different colors and hues of paint on it, and it's up to us. And then we have what effectively, and this is the part of the metaphor that's not really perfect, but we have a blank sheet, which is how do we solve the housing crisis? Here are the colors that we get to paint with. We have to pick the paints. We have to pick the colors and the hues. I think, and I understand Dean's point, and by the way, I was here last night for the planning board meeting, and there were some tight collars in response to some of these things. But they, I think, stepped up and recognized that there will perhaps be some, as Laura said, softening of some of the language. But at the end of the day, another word that was used in the introduction, it's a menu. And we're not going to pick everything. We're probably going to be a lot of things that we don't pick. And as you say, the processes that have to be, or the hoops that have to be jumped through to use any one of these are the same ones that we're very familiar with. and are going to be whatever, a safety valve, if you will, going forward for some of the concerns that have been expressed. So with that, yes, ma'am.
So I agree with both of you on that point, taking that this, and I'll use the metaphor, these are tools in the toolbox that we can take out, look at, decide if we want to go forward with it. It's very similar to any of the other production plans we have. The last time we built out, RFPs, hiring specialists, housing specialists, we did an inventory of the town. I mean, we've had all these different things leading up to this time where we are now actively looking at a production plan that's addressing for today what we need to get us forward in supporting our community. And I think it's well written. I think it's giving us a lot of options, and I'm very grateful for the time that's been spent on this by the entire community, from the public engagements to having consideration with the housing community committees and the planning board, and now us. So that's pretty much where I'm at with the document.
Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
Just more of a question, actually, because I did not watch the planning board meeting or attend it last night. Could you kind of expand a little bit more on the softening of the language? Because I know in our packet, you're looking for kind of a sign off from both the planning board committee and the select board. And if there's some edits or suggestions that were put out there, I mean, I guess frankly, I would have liked maybe a joint meeting with the planning board and select board to kind of discuss this a little bit. That would have been a nice little venue to kind of go back and forth. I served on the planning board for many years, and I think the members of that committee interacting with members of the select board and kind of a dialogue may have been a benefit. But can you give me some background of what actually happened last night or what input they provided? And
I'm happy to take that.
please, thank you.
So the presentation to them was exactly the same as the one that I just gave to you. And the recommendations that they had, there were two main comments. One was to add a brief preamble somewhere in the introduction portion of the document where we just articulate a little bit of some of the wins and some of your accomplishments that you've done in the last 5 years. And then also the qualifying language, mainly as it pertains to the zoning recommendations. They were just noticing that many of the strategies had softened language like explore this idea or consider this change. And they wanted that same kind of softening language to be on the zoning recommendations as well, because the zoning recommendations as they're written now are often quite strong. As you noticed, it's just sort of strengthen the zoning bylaw by doing X, Y, Z.
But if I may, just to add to that one thing, and this is what I took away from some of the comments, which was a collective recognition that between the 2/3 vote needed at town meeting and just the process of getting to a consensus to bring something to town meeting, that these zoning recommendations were very, very challenging, just in terms of contemplating the possibility of getting them past town meeting. So it really was in terms of thinking, what do we have to do in order to pursue some of these things? And that I think probably goes to what Laura was saying in terms of softening the language a little bit to turn it from do this into consider this or contemplate this. And these are, to use the other metaphor, these are tools in your toolbox that you can consider using. Dean? Oh, yeah, Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see again, I'm just going to focus on recommendation 6, strategy 6. I'd like to see the language before I'm asked to vote on it. That's all. And I don't know why we have to take a vote tonight if you need time to come up with some modifying language. This is the first time I'm seeing this, and I'm not comfortable supporting the document with this language or just blindly accepting that we're going to entrust our consultant to come up with language that might satisfy the concerns that at least I've expressed, and maybe perhaps some others at the planning board have expressed. So I don't see why we can't defer action on this for another week.
Let me ask Gloria if there's any element of timetable here that I mean, apart from the, I would say, very obvious convenience of getting this done tonight as opposed to next week, I guess I would invite you to tell us whether there are other impinging considerations that we should take into account.
There are no deadlines for the submission to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. Some things to consider are that the current 2018 plan has expired. We have a 9-month contract with our consultants, which is about to also come to an end. And I would say that if you want to hold off a week, that's fine. But I can also guarantee you that I go over every word in these documents too. So if you were to approve it with changes to, the zoning section, and always say things like, rather than amend the zoning bylaw to do this, consider amending the zoning bylaw to do this. I could personally guarantee you that we would do that. We wouldn't take in your comments and agree to make those changes and then not do it.
Corey.
Well, if I understand your comments correctly, then while I very much respect the efforts you put into this, very, very, very much, if we can get a clean document within a week's time, I'm fine waiting a week. And this is too important a document to not do our full due diligence on it. So if we can turn this over in a week, clean copy, and move it forward, I'm happy to wait a week.
Katie, am I wrong? We did not have, were we still up in the air as to whether we were going to have an October meeting? So if we do this, we're basically saying we're going to have a meeting that we would not otherwise have had?
Yes, that's correct. I think we were still waiting on potential agenda items. And,
Yeah, so that's a consideration as well. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, a week doesn't mean a whole lot to me either. However, I'm certainly ready to approve this and to even make a motion to approve it this evening, knowing that whether it's colors on a palette or whether it's tools in a toolbox, whatever metaphor you want to strike, that these items, these 42 strategies that have a long way to go before they are reality. And I would, and then to assuage Dean's concern about item number 6, I mean, I would even suggest consider strengthening Chatham's zoning bylaw to allow duplexes. A consideration is not a directive. And I think a lot of this document was very artfully worded so that we had wiggle room with respect to how it's presented. And I think a consideration of strengthening Chatham's zoning bylaw to allow duplexes is a fine recommendation. And I would suggest that this evening so that we can move forward. Now, waiting a week doesn't bother me a bit. If it means we have to have another meeting, it bothers me more. Not that I don't mind meeting with you folks and discussing really important stuff, but anyway, Dean has his hand up. So those are my thoughts. I mean, I'm
all right, well, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
I just made some edits here to number 6, because that's the one that concerns me. What if it were to read, consider, and I'm using Gloria's word, amending Chatham zoning bylaw to allow duplexes by right in all residential zones, subject to appropriate considerations or parameters, whatever. I'm following up on.
How about processes?
Well, I think it's more than process. I think I'm thinking of the current zoning bylaw that has, 10 criteria, subject to appropriate criteria.
Criteria is fine. Does anybody have a problem around the table here?
No, not at all. No, I think, yeah.
Good. If that does it for you, I have been trying to protect that meeting, non-meeting, number one. Number two, I'll just say, in terms of the experience, the Affordable Housing Trust Board, I think it's fair to say, put Laura and her colleagues through their paces, to put it very mildly. We sent them back to the drawing board several times on issues that people were not happy with. This thing has been really worked over, and between that and the fact that it is, another way to think about it is aspirational, and it is suggestive, as opposed to prescriptive. I appreciate your comment. I endorse the comment, but I really would like to act on this evening. Yeah, Gloria?
I just wanted to say that I think that Dean's suggestion is fabulous. I mean, there is no way that we would put forward duplex zoning that didn't include criteria.
Clearly.
So to specify it is perfectly acceptable and reasonable.
So with that, I'm going to invite comment from the public, if anybody has it. I can't, from where, Ms. Gibbs.
Yes, thank you. There's just one item on there that I wanted to comment on. I have before. It's regarding identifying properties within town that would be suitable for approaching people for a payment of $20,000 to deed restrict their homes, so in perpetuity, so that they would be used as affordable housing, if I understand it correctly. And my concern is that normally I would assume if you're looking for something, within the next 5 years, the people would more likely be elderly. And so when that would occur, I mean, there are so many situations in terms of legal issues where it could be held in a life estate, in trust, there could be an executor, and there are beneficiaries of that property. And obviously, if you deed restrict a property, the value on resale is going to be substantially reduced. So what kind of legal representation, first of all, would the town council be representing the town in terms of, reviewing all those documents? I mean, there's so much to consider. And would the person be provided with funds for legal representation? Because it seems to me that would be absolutely necessary. I think that's something that has to be addressed, because I would have concerns about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, do you have you look like you might be contemplating a comment.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to, it'd be helpful if I had maybe the strategy number that the resident was referring to, because the $20,000 that we talked about in the presentation was for a lease to locals program that's similar to something Provincetown does, and that isn't a deed restriction. It's it's a program that is funded by a portion of the town's local option room tax revenue in the case of Provincetown.
I guess I don't know which one was the 20,000. I know that number in the discussions when this was being developed was talked about offering a sum of money to an individual to deed restrict their property in perpetuity so that it could be used as affordable housing. So maybe the 20,000 was not the same issue, but that number had been bantied about. Nobody had known what the number was. It's that situation that concerns me.
Yeah, so I do remember that discussion. I think in the end, we don't have a strategy that's specific to that. We're looking more at identifying funding streams for year-round occupancy restrictions and trying to develop a requirement for that. But it's you're right that it's really more on the next step on that is to learn more and try to see if there's an effective program that could be put together. Is there enough money to do it? Are there any legal issues you brought up some good issues. So I think at this point, we're only talking about starting to plan for that, not any actual, actionable program at this moment.
Well, and to follow up that, I think there are elements of that to be found in each of strategy 18, 19, and 20. 20, which speak more generally about these features conceptually. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I would move approval of the housing production plan if we don't have any other public comment.
I was going to say, I just want to look at the board one more time and see if there, Ms. Gibbs, do you have your hand up again, or, no, you don't? Okay.
And I'll second it.
But with the language that Mr. Nacastro suggested for
Yep.
item number 6.
Yep.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Any further discuss, yes.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's a vote to adopt.
Well, the language said approve, but,
Okay.
I mean.
I know the planning board voted last night to adopt it. I believe that was Laura's language earlier, so I just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
It does say board action to approve the housing production plan. That's why I chose that word rather than adopt. That's okay. And approve and adopt.
There you go.
Second.
And ratify. All those in favor, Mr. Matters.
Aye.
Mr. Dykens.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, and Mr. Nacastro.
Fabulously aye.
Thank you very much. Laura, thanks very much.
Thank you. That was
Appreciate
great.
Well, thank you. Right back to you. Okay.
And Gloria, thank you as well. Moving right along, our next item is item D, considering acceptance of a $10,000 donation to support the removal of trees. Mr. Greg, welcome.
Hello, thank you. Greg Berman, your Director of Natural Resources. I'll make this one relatively brief. This is the same property owner, 97 Talippi, that we had the discussion about the road plates about before. This is the same project, but we're not talking about road plates this evening. This is simply a check for $10,000 that would come to the town. It's the town staff's intention to use that money to clean up some of the trees. You've heard that the refuge has cleared a significant amount of trees off the tidal flats. There are still some trees in deeper water that they couldn't access with their equipment. It's really always been our hope to be able to get the trees off the flats and the trees out of deeper water. With this donation, which is part of the mitigation for this property, we were going to use that money to have a barge and crane go out, get the trees that couldn't be gotten with other equipment. Even if we did not have this donation, we would still be exploring, how to get that in our operating budget, because these trees are a hazard. Trying to think what else. These are not the trees from the property of 97 Talippi. These are from Morris Island in general. We did have the property owner mark his trees, or the property's trees specifically. The ones that would be gotten during this effort don't necessarily have that mark on them that we've seen.
Shireen?
Greg, thanks for clarifying who owned the trees, or however. Are the trees in question that are going to be removed in an area where there's resources, like shellfish resources? And would that be impacted by the cranes activity? And has that been mitigated as well?
So during the refuge's work, they also examine that. This work would actually be, not traversing on the flats. It would be a crane reaching out and lifting up. So it would only impact shellfish, directly under that tree, and it would probably improve that. But it should not have an impact on the shellfish. Some of them may be in those areas, but those will be the ones across the channel or in deeper water.
So, thank you. So how many trees are we talking about? Do we have an assessment of that? And is this $10,000 covering the entire cost of us removing? And if not, what is the cost to the town going to be?
Right, so we're hoping to get we're working with a local contractor to get a day rate to see how far we can stretch this money. How many trees are out there right now? After this last storm, I can't say anymore. Before that, it was a handful versus the, 70 to 80 that were all the way across the flats. This is much closer to a handful. It could theoretically be done in a day or two with this equipment. But, there's a lot with this kind of field work that just isn't known right now. So that's why it would be a day rate, and we would get the most impactful and dangerous ones first. And this is, again, something that we're going to have to assess with the refuge and property owners kind of on a seasonal basis to see how things look before spring comes around again.
So with this $10,000, you don't think at this point it'll be enough to remove all the trees, or we don't know because of having like a 5-day nor'easter blow its way through Chatham?
Right. I think the funds probably would have gotten all the ones that we knew about remaining, but I can't guarantee by the time they get out there.
Okay, thanks.
Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Greg, it's my understanding that there's a barge and a crane doing the rock wall there. Are we considering using the same barge and crane or not? Are we renting our own, or what's the deal there?
So town staff did explore various contractors. The mobilization and demob of the barge is by far the most significant part of that cost. That's why we're trying to coordinate a time when a contractor is either coming to or leaving that area. And we are in conversation with that particular contractor. We would still have to potentially get various quotes, but somebody who's on site is going to be much cheaper because they don't need to do those mob costs.
So is it also fair to say that no matter what it costs, $10,000 would work to defray the overall cost if it's north of that?
Yes, if we had to, start this process, I mean, we're talking 20 to 30,000 just to get the barge there. And now, hopefully, we're just talking about day rates once it's already there.
Okay, thanks. Not quite sure I understood. Are we going to ask the barge that's there currently working on that rock wall to help us out?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think that's very cost effective. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Dean?
Yeah, so you clarified a lot of things I didn't understand previously, but, so these are dead trees that nature has deposited there, right?
Yes.
That's the story. And we think, so I know we had a citizen ask a question about liability earlier, but you indicated that, to your understanding, what's there now, what was there before the weekend storm probably didn't come from the subject property.
Correct.
Or at least not in most part.
That's my best understanding at the time.
Not in most part. Why is this property owner willing to offer $10,000 to us for this purpose?
So much of that property has been lost. There's not actually much room left on the property to do mitigation for the rock wall for the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
So they're all exploring options of trying to do mitigation, not necessarily on the property. This is one way that the applicant could do mitigation in the general area and, have that applied to the overall project of the revetment.
Was this one of their conditions in the order of conditions?
Yes.
So it's similar to the gate?
Similar, yes, but, this one doesn't include any kind of,
Good.
handoff of property. It's just
Is there a donation agreement where?
There is no agreement. It would just be a check that would be handed over to Carrie that
Okay.
would go in the appropriate account.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So that begs me another question. Are we setting precedents that mitigation for, that is not on a parcel could be offered to another property owner that they do mitigation off property in future scenarios?
I couldn't tell you how often it's been done by this Conservation Commission, but, the state and other conservation commissions around the Cape have done this sort of thing before. It's often called fee in lieu of mitigation. But this, I think the Conservation Commission in discussions weren't necessarily comfortable with just, taking money, but actually come up with a project to mitigate some of the environmental effects of not just the revetment, but the trees falling in the area for the safety of the town.
But with or without this donation, the trees are going to get removed.
That was the plan, yes.
Right. Okay.
So I think I see our chairperson of the Conservation Commission. I'm guessing she may have a comment. Please go ahead.
Yes, it's Karen Latin, again, Chair of Conservation. As far as conservation is concerned, we have allowed mitigation not on the property, but elsewhere, but always for the town. Because some of your projects in the town do not have the space for the mitigation that needs to be done for the work that's going to be done in that area. And so we allow that mitigation to be elsewhere. We also, with the airport, we allowed a donation into a special fund that would be used by the town for mitigation elsewhere. So I don't believe we're setting a precedence, and we worked hard on our order trying to figure out how to do this mitigation for that property. And this is sort of a three-pronged approach. They have a lot of mitigation that they're able to put in for the work being done, but they cannot do the trees easily on the property that exists. So that's why this money has been offered as a part of our mitigation. And then the third prong, of course, you know about, which is the plates for the tidal gate. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Just
Karen.
one follow-up question. The potential donation of $10,000, would that equate to the equivalent mitigation that would have been required on property if Mother Nature hadn't been so nasty?
If you're asking me,
Yes.
it was an amount we came up with trying to figure out how many trees were lost and the fact that they can't easily put that amount of trees back in. So, you know, we struggle with what's the right amount of money to mitigate if you can't put in your own trees on your property. And it's a very hard thing to come up with. So we felt with the overall plan, with the mitigation they're doing, which is extensive, I will say, and then this amount of money, and hopefully if we do get the plates, and I know that's all a different subject and a lot way beyond our ability as Conservation Commission to determine, we felt that was a fair amount.
All right, thank you.
Jeff?
I'd like to move, we approve the donation of $10,000.
And I'll take a second. Okay, but I just want to ask one question. There are no hooks here. There's no agreement. There are no hooks that are associated with this donation.
Correct. No
Okay,
agreement, no
thank you.
hooks.
All those in favor? Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dyken?
Aye.
And Mr. Metters?
Reluctant aye.
Okay.
That's an abstain.
I get it. No, that's an I minus.
Yeah.
Okay, next case. I think next here is the one-day alcohol permit for the Cape Cod Fishermen's Alliance. Do we have somebody either in the room or online to present this application?
Public library. That's the public library.
I don't see anybody. I think we're going to have to defer that. Oh, well,
We ought to move it.
Maybe she doesn't hear.
whom are we? Jen Allard? are you on? There she is, perhaps. Ah, saved by the bell.
She may not be there.
Does anybody have a phone number? Well, I was gonna say, I'll push it back. Yeah, why don't you call and we'll move on with the one-day alcohol permit for Mahi Gold on 3 days, October 19, December 13, and December 14. Sorry? Rebecca Vocal? There's somebody. Hello?
You guys got me?
Yeah, go ahead.
How are you? Sorry, I was just texting Jen to see if she could get on for you. So Brian Vocal, Mahi Gold, and I put together a few permits for your consideration.
Any questions from the board? Corey, go ahead.
Hi, Brian. Just a quick question. Traditionally, when we go through these, we assign the responsibility to some party. Sam Johnson is the individual who put the application together. So I guess my first confirmation question is, we will be, if approved, we will be assigning these under the responsibility of Sam, because if there are any questions or concerns on either, and during any of the events, and we have a point person that needs to be contacted on property, he will be the one, I guess, taking the responsibility of that event.
That's correct, and that's fine. Sam is currently driving back from New York City. We had a trade show at the Javits Center for the last 3 days. So he is en route with a car full of dresses after showing our line in New York. So I tried to spell him from hopping on while driving.
Oh, that's fine. And he will be present at all these events?
He'll be present, as well as myself and my wife, Rebecca. But yeah, Sam is our director of operations. He is based in Chatham,
All right,
year-round.
All right, nope, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Anybody else? Brian, I just want to call attention, in our staff memo, it was noted that Mahi Gold has previously received a written warning for violations of the regulations in 2023 for allowing patrons to leave the premises with alcohol. The suggestion, I think, I suspect the board will agree, that any approved license, the license that we grant here, has a requirement that the doors remain closed and not propped open during the dates and times of the event, so that people can't easily pass back and forth out into the courtyard or otherwise.
Understand. So my only comment there would be, a couple of comments actually would be, I don't want to debate the merits of the citation tonight. I'm sure that was 10 months ago. I do have some issues with the citation as a whole, just based on the events of that evening, as well as the comments that were in the citation not matching up with any of the verifications that we did on our end. But my bigger issue with that was, I did follow up immediately after receiving that citation with both the town office and the police department with no response. So my suggestion for the future, because I respect the direction that the town wants to take it in to make it a safe event, but having some sort of opportunity to be heard. If we're going to be issuing citations, there has to be some sort of process to, not rebut, but, have dialogue, certainly, as a business owner.
I'm going to accept those all for the purposes, A, offered, and B, of moving this along. I just want, do you have any problem if part of our grant of the license this evening includes a requirement that the doors stay open, stay closed, so that patrons coming in have to pull the doors open and enter that way, or leaving have to push the doors open and leave that way?
No, I'll accept that. I mean, I do think that, the different permits are kind of different events. I think Oktoberfest, lends itself to being, the weather in retail and certainly having the doors open, and it's not a, as filled event, as people kind of strolling Main Street. And then I do think just on Stroll gets so busy, which is, I understand why you're trying to do what you're doing. But part of having the doors open during Stroll is to just have some sort of level of breathing in the space and letting some fresh air kind of, cool down that space with the amount of people that, pass through on a Stroll night. But I'm not going to refute, the license based on that request.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your comments as well. Anything else from the board?
Mr. Chair, I move to grant Mahi Gold, located at 465 Main Street, a special one-day alcohol permit for the following dates and times: Saturday, October 19th, 2024, from 12 noon to 8 p.m., Friday, December 13th, 2024, from 12 noon to 10 p.m., and Saturday, December 14th, 2024, from 12 noon to 10 p.m. Doors are to remain closed for the duration of the licensed hours.
Can I make one amendment? Or I'll second, and then an amended?
Go ahead.
Just to amend, to grant Mighty Gold, well, where's his name go? Sam Johnson, representing Mighty Gold. We usually identify some party, so that's, other than that, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Fine, good.
Okay, with that, all those in favor, Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, and Mr. Nacastro?
I'll say aye. I just wanted to clarify, these doors are not going to be locked. They just.
No.
Be closed.
I mean, I'm thinking, normally, the doors are not open. If you
Yeah.
want to go in the store, you got to open the door. I think that's right, is it
Yeah.
not?
We
in good weather,
try and
they-
have our doors open regardless of the time of year. Retail, welcomes, especially our doors, but certainly the doors will not be locked at any matter, due to fire code, at all times.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I appreciate it, guys.
And
Thank you very
good
much
luck.
for your time.
And have a
Thank you.
good sessions. All right, we're going to go back to the one-day alcohol permit for Meet the Fleet for the Cape Cod Fishermen's Alliance, and we have Jen
Howard.
Allard on.
Yeah, sorry, I was having a Wi-Fi issue before. Apologies.
No problem. Welcome.
Thank you. So we have our Meet the Fleet. We do these 4 times a year. It's actually tomorrow at the Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance office, 1566 Main Street, where we invite a fisherman and a chef to come and meet the public and talk about what it's like fishing here on the Cape and also cooking with local seafood. We have a 30-minute, before the talk sort of reception, and we are looking to serve beer from one of our partners, Quahog Republic.
Okay, thank you very much. Any thought?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, Ms. Davis?
Aye.
And Mr. Dykens?
Aye.
And Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Have a good session tomorrow. Our next item is a one-day alcohol permit for the Chatham Boat Company Fall Open House on Saturday, October 5th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And do we have Mr. Federley, is it?
I am.
Federley.
I'm here. How you
Welcome.
doing? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to tell us about the event a little bit?
Sure. We're having a one-day event. It's a meet and greet, like a fall small festival to introduce our clients to us and the town to us. And we're just looking for a one-day pass for beer. And we think it's going to be a great day.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. in your application, it's silent on this, but we safely assume that either you or Hog Island is going to check IDs or somehow assure
Yes, sir.
that no minors are served? Okay.
Of course.
I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Dykens.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, and Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Thanks very much, Todd. Have a good one.
Thank you very much. I
Okay, you're all
appreciate it.
set.
Appreciate it.
Next is consider request for sales on town property at the 17th Annual Holiday Shopping Fair on November 23 from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Chatham Community Center. And we have, whom do we have? Ms. Fredericks?
Yes, how you doing? Sue
Hi
Frederick
there.
here, Recreation Coordinator.
So do you want to tell us what we're doing here?
Sure. Yep, just coming back for our 17th Annual Holiday Shopping Fair at the Chatham Community Center Gymnasium. It'll be on November 23rd from 9 to 2. We raise the funds raised for the table fairs goes directly to our after-school program, which is a park after-school program, positive after-school recreation for kids. Again, Sharon Stark and I have run this for 17 years. It's a real popular event. Local crafters come in and sell their goods, and the park kids that are in our program come and help with the tables, and we do raffles, and it's a lot of fun. So it's a real popular event, and it helps out the families with field trips and so on. So just
Thank you.
standard procedure.
Thank you very much.
They've done this for a
Sure.
long time, for
Yeah,
every year.
no,
so
absolutely.
I move approval to grant a special permit.
Second.
Good. All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye, and Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Dykens.
Aye.
And Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Thank you, Sue. Have a-
Great, thank you very much. Have a
Yep.
great night.
Yep, have a good one. Next is Chatham Chamber and Merchants Association Oktoberfest update. Kristen Muller and Barry Desilets.
Mr. Chair, I'm recusing myself on this matter.
Okay.
So am I, yes.
Uh-oh.
I'm tempted to recuse myself, so that we have to, we have
Can
to
I
have a.
recuse myself? Yeah. Hi. Kristen Muller, representing the Chamber of Commerce and Merchants Association. Before we get started, I just want to clarify something that was in your packets from some of the emails between myself and Town Hall. The issue of the fee for Oktoberfest had not been addressed the last time I was in front of you, so I just want to be clear that this was not something that was deceptive or any of that. We didn't even have a budget yet the last time I asked you for permission for property, so just to be clear that this is a new thing. Anyhow, there seem to be two different conversations going on regarding the fee. Publicly anyhow, the first being that we just shouldn't charge. And I think that that's separate than from what we're here for tonight. Just to be clear, there's a very large budget for Oktoberfest. It's a big production. We rent stages, we pay bands to come, we have all sorts of things going on, and the total budget is in the tens of thousands. We have gotten sponsorships from lots of local businesses that will offset some of that, but this is not a moneymaker. Even if you do decide we are allowed to charge a fee or not, this is not a money grab. This is like a break-even thing, and as noted, if we did make money, we would, at the end of the year, be donating that to local charities. We're not here to line anybody's pockets. Nobody's coming out of this any richer. So that's that conversation. The real issue is the deed to the park, I think, and that's what's at question here about commerce in the park. I pulled the deed a long time ago. I've been through the deed several times. It's very clear that commerce is not to transact in the park. We've addressed that every time we've ever applied. All financial transactions, whether it be from our vendors or from us, merch sales, anything, nothing happens in the park proper. It all happens in the parking lot on Chatham Bars Ave or in the town hall parking lot, and no money is exchanged in the park proper. If you were to approve the fee, that would still be the case. Traffic would be directed down Chatham Bars Avenue, and the paid entrance would be into that parking lot on Chatham Bars Avenue. The only way in and out of the front of the park would be re-entry or previous sales, which, just to note, in terms of the community backlash, there are over 100 people who have already purchased their wristband. It's not everybody that's upset about the fee. So anyhow, so the question is the deed to the park. As I read it, you all have some leeway on controlling what happens in the park and in giving us permission to use the park for the day. The question is whether that is exclusive use or not, and I think maybe that's what we're here to discuss. Some of the feedback is about whether people could be kept out of the park or not. And I guess that I would leave that to you to determine, but the fee is not a money grab. It's about controlling entry and exit on a really large event.
So I'm going to start here. I'm going to say first, you triggered a very vague memory in my mind that there was actually, maybe when you were last in front of us, some talk about your coming back. I don't remember specifically about what it was or whatever, but just to kind of get that issue completely off the table. I accept what you're saying, but I also think I remember that it was far in the future, and there were some things that perhaps were up in the air, and I now have the idea that maybe we thought you were going to come back. So we'll put that to one side. I'm also going to make it more difficult for us over here because I often say that we have a lot of lawyers in Chatham. Some of them have licenses. I happen to be one who doesn't have a license, although maybe a little more education than some. My view was that I don't agree with your interpretation, because I think if charging admission, that's business in my view. However, town council said that the deed is not an obstacle here. So you're in high cotton where that's concerned. So that gets us to the real issue, which is, what are we going to do? And there is, I think, I'll speak for myself, although I suspect that my friends that are left here have similar reactions. The reaction from the public, albeit perhaps it's only 10 or 20 people, but we deal with reactions from 10 or 20 people all the time.
Understood.
And so I just want to say that that's troubling to me. The 100 bands that you've already sold further complicates the issue for me. But I want to ask, and what you thought or think the revenue from this $5 entrance charge might be. And I want to ask, as part and parcel of that, what the shortfall in your budget, what the deficit that you anticipate would be if you don't charge the fee.
Likely somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000.
So you think that you're going to get
Several thousand people.
2,000 people
More than that,
to pay
probably, yes.
to buy the.
Yeah, the kids 13 and under are free. So we're not charging for the kids, we're charging for the adults. But last year in the pouring rain, we had a couple thousand people in the park.
But for free. I mean.
Well, I understood, but like, I'm the one who monitors the email account, so even though it says CMA events, it's me behind the other side. After this question, so we were already selling bracelets before this question arose, and then since then, handful of people have inquired, and so I said to one of the gentlemen this week, well, we're not sure whether we're going to be able to continue charging or whether it will be a suggested donation that, we might not be allowed to. You might want to hold off on buying your tickets because, and he said, that's such a nominal fee, I'd be glad to pay you for it. And he went and bought his tickets, his bracelets. All I'm saying is there are, I think that most people will pay. I think that some might not.
Oyster Fest is $30.
33 this year.
$33 this year. So
$33 this
we
year.
have more entertainment, we have more things.
What do you mean, Oyster Fest?
Oyster Fest in
Wellfleet.
Wellfleet is $33
Oh, up
to
there.
get in.
Oh,
Yeah,
up there.
yeah.
That's the entrance fee.
Okay.
And Cape Cod beer, Cape Cod beer is $25.
If I may, one
And the
other
Bass
question.
River Festival is also $30 for an adult to get in, just for context.
Okay, so one other question.
Yeah.
What do you think people would say if you said, we would like a donation, but you can come in whether you make a donation or not?
I think that a lot of them would. I think that it complicates the process. I think that the idea of pre-selling the wristbands was to facilitate the entry that day. We don't want lines and lines of people. We don't want people to have to be lining Chatham Bars Avenue. We'd love to get it done on the front end and then just be moving forward. So, I would hope that most people would still see the value in the $5, but,
Well, I mean, again.
Then
not
we've got to push
I'm-
them still through the
One
parking
last
lot,
question,
yeah.
and then I'll let Jeff solve this problem. I mean, you could do that, but just say it's voluntary,
we could.
We just feel it's a lot easier.
It's
like-
a lot
like having-
easier.
No,
having-
you
having-
can, you
having
can
a
offer
button
people,
or-
you can offer people a wristband.
But we can't do that at the street. We have to send them,
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, well.
Yeah, it's a logistics issue for us,
Okay,
as much as anything else, but.
I'm not convinced that it's not, that even that problem is not soluble, but I'll stop there.
It's
Jeff, go
solvable,
ahead.
it's just
Yeah. Go
complicated
ahead,
is all.
Jeff.
So
That's all.
I just had a quick question on,
Yep.
this is the same event you've had for years there?
Yes.
Okay. And in years past, you've never charged a $5 admission fee. This is an admission fee, is what I understand.
Yes, we've but the event has expanded significantly.
Okay. But, I have a problem with the spirit of the event, having never charged for it in the past, never having presented to the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board in the past or this year, that you're going to charge for it. And I was taken aback when I read about it in the paper that, in fact, you were asking for $5 for admission. I don't think we ought to be charging $5 for admission to Oktoberfest. Now, that being said, I think the finesse here is to ask for a donation and say, we strongly would love to have you make a donation. The donation goes into the coffers of the chamber and the merchants, and should we have a surplus, which I'm hearing is maybe not likely to happen if you have these extraordinary expenses, but should you have a surplus, you'll be donating it to charity. So I strongly suggest you take that tack, because I am not going to approve the charging of
I respect
admission.
that, and I think.
I'm not going to.
Okay, I respect that, and I think one of the problems in this town overall is that we're paralyzed by, it's never been that way before. And a nominal fee, and geez, we've never done that before, so we're not going to approve it? That's my point.
It's never, not to have retorts here, but it's never been in the spirit of the event before, and I don't understand why it should be now.
The event, and part of why this event has expanded came this way. Like, we had suggestions that we make this event bigger, and we have made the event considerably bigger.
Okay.
May I just add one thing, just to sort of bring the tone back down a little bit?
Sure.
Our entire intention in all of this is to increase commerce in the town, to draw people to the town in the off-season when the businesses are trying to make that last little bit of money before everything shuts down for the winter, because we all know this becomes a ghost town. It's about the commerce. It's about celebrating with the locals who are here in the off-season that don't maybe want to go down to Main Street in the the middle of the summer because it's crazy out, and so we want to celebrate together. And the idea of the nominal fee is simply because the event's gotten really big. We bring 6 bands in from all over New England. We actually house some of them overnight because they travel far enough from New Hampshire or Vermont, and we get them hotel rooms so that they can stay and perform. And the spirit of the event is not to make money, which is why the fee was set at $5 as opposed to the $33 for some of these other events, simply because we're trying to cover our costs is all. And that is absolutely the sole reason.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the deed is irrelevant. I had not seen anything from town council until just now.
And to be clear, I think there was, no, there,
sentence from him.
well,
I'm not clear what he's
I
even
called
saying.
him today because I hadn't seen anything either, and but what he said to me was he didn't think it was a problem.
Yeah, this is what he wrote in response to an email from Kathy. I see nothing in the deed that would preclude the licensing of the park in this manner. The only issue I have under these circumstances is whether business is being conducted in the park. I mean, with all due respect to town council, that doesn't tell me anything.
Well,
So I don't really, it's a public park, and I'm bothered by, and I think I truly believe your intentions are pure. And I don't think there was anything nefarious about how this developed. And I'm sympathetic to the financial burden that's on the Merchants Association in running this very welcome program. But it troubles me to think that people would be charged anything to enter a public park, and that's a bother to me.
I mean, the Taste of Chatham charges to enter, and that's in a public park. I understand that other parts of the park are still open at that time, but nonetheless, you are paying to enter a public park for the Taste of Chatham.
Let me ask you a question.
I mean, and the argument could be made that the park is still technically open to other people. Do you really think anybody else is going into Chase Park in the middle of the Taste of Chatham? I don't know that they really would.
Did the budget increase substantially from last year?
A bit, yes, because we brought in bigger bands, more bands. What we did last year.
Well, that's what I'm really trying to get
yes.
at, is whether there's an increment here that.
Yes,
that it
we've
was
now
part of the
hired
motivation.
staging and we've hired more bands. And yes, the budget has gone up. We also took a really big hit, like it was a very large hit last year. And,
We're not
it just
guaranteed
was.
sun.
Right. So,
Say again?
We're not guaranteed sun. We got poured on last year.
So, anyhow.
Well, I suspect I'm in the minority here, but to me, this is just this probably, I doubt this would have been this kind of a problem if we had done this back in May. Perhaps I'm wrong about that, but, it's harder now. That said, I'm sympathetic, and to me, I appreciate the motivation in terms of the merchants and bringing everybody in as you described, but, it's like a county fair. It's very nice just to go downtown and wander around and maybe have a beer or something or whatever, and just kind of soak up the town at the end of the year. I think that's very enjoyable for everybody. And I'm reluctant to saddle you guys with, the whole issue of what is a little bit of a, I'll just call it a failure to communicate. So I would support this if that's worth anything, but.
I would make it voluntary. I would have a donation, and most people will probably pay and some won't, but that's what I would do. In the spirit of the event, public place, Oktoberfest. Thanks.
Are you, backing up to your original comments, are you planning to collect the $5 in addition to online, on-site? And where
Well,
would that be?
it
On
has to
Chatham Bars?
happen on Chatham Bars
Chatham Bars
Avenue. It
Avenue.
can't happen in the park. So that's what I was discussing with the logistics. We'd have to filter all of the foot traffic down, or ask people once they're already in, oh, by the way, can you go down to the
So
parking lot and make a
People wouldn't
donation?
be able to enter the park through Main Street unless they had the wristband.
Well, no, I mean, if it's a suggested donation, they
No,
would
if
all
it's-
be allowed to enter the park. The idea of getting them down into the parking lot to make their donation after they've already entered the park is, you lose
Right.
that barrier. Ooh, excuse me.
Right, but
that initial-
if you were to charge people, if your model,
Yes.
you'd have to somehow guard, or I don't want to say block, the Main Street entrance so that people would,
We
people
had
who didn't
volunteers
purchase
that,
it
yes,
online.
because there's flow of traffic between the two venues.
someone
because
shows up at Main Street and someone would say, you have to go get a,
go down the street.
get a
If you
wristband.
already have a wristband
Right,
from
right.
either town hall or pre-purchase, come on in, otherwise go down the street, yes.
Right.
So let me just go, but you're selling these online right now, right?
Well, I'm about to have to refund everybody, but
No,
yeah.
well, there are, yeah,
Yes, they
you can offer them, you can offer it and say, if you want to leave the money with us, it's a donation.
Absolutely.
But in terms of just the mechanics of how you're selling them online, I don't understand why you can't say, this is voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to buy them, but if you'd like to have a wristband that demonstrates that you are supporting the event,
Yes.
contribute $5 or any other amount that you would like to contribute, and we'll send you a wristband. And keep going.
Okay,
I totally agree.
I don't, it's not perfect,
yes.
but I think it solves everybody's problem, and, I'll be happy to buy a wristband at an, maybe a slightly higher price.
$10 for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're well on our way to 10,000.
We do appreciate your time, and we understand the sentiment. We get it that it is new. I want to wholeheartedly, we had internal struggles over whether or not to do this. The idea is that it's a very large expense. Depending upon how this goes or not this year, if it doesn't go smoothly with the donation, we're likely going to scale the event back next year and just not do it the way we are. But, that remains to be seen.
We'll see how it goes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks very much. Okay, well, we can bring back the faint of heart. Okay. All right, appointments, we have 4 candidates for 2 open seats on the Community Housing Partnership. One for a term that concludes on June 30, 2025, and a second that concludes on June 30, 2027. I'll open the floor for nomination.
Mr. Shell,
Yes.
I move to appoint Lynn Van Dyne as a member of the Chatham Community Housing Partnership Committee until June 30th, 2025, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
may I ask a question? Did Mr. Higgins indicate whether he's agreeable?
He did.
Yes, he did by email.
Okay, I mean, I support both of those candidates. I was just wondering whether the dates might be switched. I had a conversation with the
Oh,
committee
I'm sorry. I'm gonna say 2027
For
Ms.
Lynn.
For Ms. Van Dyne. I'm sorry, Ms.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, do we have any other nominations? All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Dyken.
Aye.
And Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Okay, the floor is open for nominations. I'm going to nominate Mr. Clark, Thomas Clark, for the seat that concludes as a member of the Chatham Community Housing Partnership Committee until June 30, 2025, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
I'll second it, but I'm going to
You can do that. So, any other nominations?
I nominate Peter Higgins. I'm sorry. I seconded that, but I'm also going to nominate Peter. I move to appoint Peter Higgins. I nominate him as a member of the Chatham Community Housing Partnership Committee until June 30th, 2025, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
I'll second that.
Okay, all right, so here we will be voting for one candidate or the other. Mr. Metters,
Peter Higgins.
Mr. Dyken,
Peter Higgins.
Ms. Davis,
Peter Higgins.
Mr. Shell says Thomas Clark, and Mr.
Peter
Castro.
Peter Higgins.
And so Mr. Higgins is elected, nominated, appointed.
Appointed.
Thank you. I think that concludes our, it does not, forgive me. The town manager's report. Katie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Just as Jill usually notes, some anniversaries for the coming month of October. We have Jeffrey Phillips with 16 years, Aaron Hemian with 19 years, Nick Ruggieri with 14 years, and some of our more recent hires, we've got Charles Chaparellis with 2 years, and Sawyer Bengston at the DPW with 1 year. You'll see from the report that we have some new hires to celebrate with Catherine Ricks as the Assistant Conservation Agent, Ellie Ward as the Fire Department Administrative Assistant, and Jordan Gagliardi, who graduated recently from the Fitchburg State University Police Program. We have our new first Adult Supportive Day Program Director. Joe Fennell actually started this week, and we've got some new hires that will be coming on later on, either this week or in the coming weeks as well. And then the other thing I wanted to note that I thought it was a great item is that the town manager, Jill Goldsmith, along with 4 other town managers, actually put together a town meeting informational program through Lower Cape TV, and just kind of a town meeting user guide, and I thought that was something that was worth noting. Other than that, there's the usual information from all of the departments in the report, and there's a lot of good information as always.
I just want to note something that Katie left out, that Kathleen Donovan has been here for 8 years. I assume does that include your earlier tenure as, we were the town planner or something before you became the director of community
Right.
development?
For a few short months, I was
Yeah.
the town planner, yes. So, yes, that's all of my time here. Thank you.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to note, I always enjoy the report, and again, everybody should read this, but I was looking at the social media accounts, because that's part of the work that I do privately. And the fact that the main sheet itself gets an open rate of 72% is extraordinary. And so that says that people are really looking for the content and are interested, and they stay interested because what that content is. So congratulations to the communications team and the staff.
Amen. Anything else? Take a motion?
You're going to the next
Yeah,
item?
to go to executive session.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I move that this item is executive session, Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21.3. I move that the Select Board go into executive session under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21, Paragraph 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, parenthesis, 32 Mill Hill Road, close parenthesis, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares, with no return to open session.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Shell says aye. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Dyken?
Aye.
And Mr. Metters?
Aye.
We are now in executive session.